Alongside my man Sterling Bennett, this is Dan Avone as we welcome you in to Warriors This Week.
Hey, turn your mic on, man. You're good now.
Oh, no, my mic's on.
You're good now.
I'm ready to go, man. I was out of bed at 6 o'clock, swam in the bay.
Nice.
Just itching to talk about them Golden State Warriors with my man Sterling Bennett. Sterling, what's on your mind? What's going on, buddy?
It's been a long week for the Warriors, it feels like. You get boat raced by Boston, in Madison Square Garden. And then you come back to the Bay and you
Not
beat,
Madison Square.
Sorry, TD Garden, excuse me. And then you come out and you beat the number 2 seeded Bucks in the Eastern Conference, and we're all riding high. This is great. It's awesome. Then you play my Chicago Bulls, and they take it to you in that second half, and you're like, what is going on? Curry gets hurt, Draymond Green fouls out, but all of a sudden, here we are, sitting in the unknown of what's going to happen now with no Steph and Curry on the court for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, let's tell you a look back at the week that was. You get smoked, and I mean embarrassed in front of the world. Nationally televised game, ABC, and the cameras are there, and you get blown out. The thing was done midway in the second quarter.
Yeah.
You bounce back against Milwaukee and blow them out by 35.
Yeah.
And then up to this point, because keep in mind, you lost to Boston. It was the end of a 4-game road trip in which you won 3 of 4.
Game didn't matter that much.
And so there's a feel-good, and then all of a sudden, the inexplicable happens, where you lose to apparently your Chicago Bulls, which you're going to have to explain why you're claiming the Chicago Bulls. But let's start here. I think, obviously, the loss hurts, but more importantly, when you talk about the Warriors going forward, the injury to Steph Curry has a lot of people up at night. You want to update people where Steph is at as far as the Warriors going forward?
I can. So Stephen Curry obviously suffered an ankle injury. He got the MRI. It came back clean according to Steve Kerr and Shams Charania. And they said he shouldn't miss more than 1 to 4 games. Obviously, he will be day-to-day. But it seems like at least for today against San Antonio and Monday against San Antonio, Stephen Curry will not play for the Golden State Warriors.
Which is okay. I mean, if you're going to miss 2 games, have it be against the worst team in the NBA. You'd like to have him back in uniform when you're at Dallas taking on Luka and the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks are one of those teams that you're chasing. They certainly sit in the 8th seed at 35-28. Nobody gave the Warriors any help last night. In fact, over the last couple of days, both the Kings, Mavericks, and the Lakers, all winners. So currently, things stack up like this in the Western Conference. You got the Warriors sitting at 33-29, 4 games over the 500 mark, but at the 10th seed all by themselves. The Lakers now a half game in front of them. Then sit the Mavericks a game and a half in front of the Golden State Warriors. Those 2 teams, Sterling, will play each other 3 more times this year beginning on Wednesday. The Kings still very much within striking distance at 7.5 games. So you're 3 games back of the Kings, who also now have won 2 in a row. And then come the Phoenix Suns, because you're eyeing that 6th seed. So you can avoid all this mess. So you don't have to play in this playing crap. Get to the 6th seed. If you want that, then you got to walk down the Phoenix Suns, who currently are 3.5 games in front of the Warriors. But before you do any of that, before you scoreboard watch and keep an eye on the other teams, you got to eat, as I like to say, what's on your plate.
Okay.
And what was on your plate were the Chicago Bulls.
My Chicago Bulls.
First of all, let's back up. My man, why? First of all, I understand the Oklahoma connection.
Oh, yeah.
I consider you a Bay Arean right now, but what's with Chicago?
So my teams are the Niners, the Giants of San Francisco, and the Chicago Bulls. I'm a 90s kid, so I watched Jordan, I watched Space Jam. I fell in love with those teams of the late 90s, the Last Dance teams, you might say. And since then, I've been infatuated with Chicago and the Bulls. Kirk Heinrich, Ben Gordon, Eddie Curry, and his bust of a self in Chicago. Those early 2000s Bulls teams were my Bulls teams. So when I watched Chicago come here, I got R.C. Davis of the Golden State Warriors saying, hey, your Bulls are in town. We'll give you some tickets. I haven't gotten to go see him play, but when I watched the Golden State Warriors lose to, again, my Chicago Bulls, although it stinks for Warriors fans, the Bulls are actually playing pretty well.
That's true.
No Zach LaVine there. The offense kind of found themselves. Kobe White's playing great basketball, kind of found himself and who he wants to be in the NBA. But for the Golden State Warriors, when you watch the Suns win, the Lakers win, the Mavericks win, you lost Stephen Curry, sure, but losing that game late against Chicago is the ultimate crusher defeat for your team. You can't lose to Chicago on your home court when you have a lead late in the game. I get there's no Steph, Draymond Green fouls out, but they are a below or near 500 team. You can't lose to them. You have to take it to them at Chase Center, and they didn't get it done.
It's a below 500 team, and you're right. Everything is magnified from here on out. You got 19 games left in the season. Some are doing the math that you have to go 16-3, 17-2, whatever it is. If you want to get to that 6 seed, you can ill afford to lose to Chicago, which is so difficult to sort of understand the Golden State Warriors right now. Because just as quickly as you're ready, or at least I'm ready to anoint them as a team that could get to the Western Conference Finals. And yes, I said that. This is a team that can get to the Western Conference Finals when you see what it is that they did against the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, you could say, okay, well, it's back-to-back, all right? And it's back-to-back games where you got Milwaukee and Chicago on the back end, but it's Chicago, all right? And you could also say, well, it's an older team. So, there's...
And they were also on the back-to-back as well. On the road,
Chicago back-to-back on the road. The Warriors are at home, so I can't buy it. Reach down. I don't care how you do it. It can be ugly, but you have to beat the Chicago Bulls. And the fact that you didn't, and we can pull back the layers and get into why didn't you double team DeRozan late in the game? You were doing it throughout the majority of the contest, and all of a sudden, you stopped double teaming him. They shot the hell out of the ball, Vucevic, and you're right, Kobe White may be one of those guys that a lot of people aren't aware of, but this guy can ball. Vucevic is, I love that when Warrior fans, when Vucevic, apparently was available, and Warrior fans were like, yeah, get a big, you need a big. What about Vucevic out in Chicago? Just go get him. Why the hell would Chicago give up on what is, arguably one of the best bigs? Again, not somebody that you hear a lot about, but that's not somebody that's just, you're going to have him for, a 12-pack and a
second-round pick. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and this is just getting back to the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warrior game. Let's just start there. It's a game that you can't lose because, you factor in maybe you're going to lose to Dallas. You got Minnesota. You got some dates with the Lakers. Maybe you can say, okay, we'll lose to one of those. But that's taking into account you're handling San Antonio. You're taking care of Chicago. You're beating Memphis. So there's no room to lose to a Chicago, which means now you're going to have to steal one from Dallas. You're going to have to beat somebody like Minnesota at Minnesota.
It makes your road 10 times tougher.
How do you put your arms around and or explain what happened the other night?
Every time it felt like the Golden State Warriors had a lead, the third quarter always seems to come back to bite them. It was 77-72. Warriors leading by 5 with just under 7 minutes left in the third quarter. Plenty of time for the Bulls to come back and whatnot, but the Bulls went on a 27-12 run and ended that third quarter going into the fourth, leading 99-89. It's the non-Stephen Curry minutes, and Stephen Curry, for as great as he is, has not been Steph Curry the past, 5 or 6 games. Like, he has been shooting at a lower rate than he usually does in his career. But that third quarter crushed Golden State. You're leading by 5, great. If you can just salvage it. And you go into the fourth quarter down by 10, then Curry gets hurt, then Draymond Green fouls out, and you have to rely on Trayce Jackson-Davis and Moses Moody and guys who maybe, although have played a lot better and are going to have to play pivotal roles for you, when you stack them up against a veteran team like DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic, Andre Drummond, it's going to be tough for young players to step up in those moments against teams that just know how to play and have been there before. So for the Warriors, you got a bunch of young bucks out there that just maybe you're playing with, I don't want to say deer in the headlights, but just got overwhelmed by a veteran team, in my opinion.
Yeah, see, I see it a little differently because in that fourth quarter, it was the kids that brought them back into that game.
Agreed.
And it was all energy. It was Moses Moody, steals, getting rebounds, just pure energy that brought them back into that contest. And as much as we try and explain it, just win the damn game. Like, that is not one of those games that you can lose to Chicago. Really quick, the text line, the 650, maybe we pump the brakes on the Bucks win. They just lost to LeBron-less Lakers team that last night. Yeah, good point. As the Milwaukee Bucks lose to the Los Angeles Lakers without LeBron James, which would have been a perfect opportunity for the Warriors, obviously, to pick up some ground, but it did not happen. Milwaukee, of course, a lot of people feel is the one team that maybe could challenge because they got Giannis and the Denver Nuggets, but I digress. Just staying with the Golden State Warriors and just getting back to Steph for a second. because you're going to be without Steph potentially for the foreseeable future. Thankfully, there's no structural damage, as they like to say, and that he could be gone for maybe a week. I've said this in doing shows here right from the outset, that Steph Curry and the injuries are pretty much imminent. You can set your watch to it. At this stage in his career, in his mid-30s, every single year, he's going to go down with an injury. Now, obviously, you hope it's not of the severe nature, that there's no torn tendons, there's no ACLs. But whether it's, and I struggle with this every week, hold on, drum roll, please. Whether it's the shoulder subluxation, got it.
Nice.
Which John Morant is dealing with. And of course, he had that shoulder injury a couple of years back. Whatever the injury is, he's usually gone for a couple of weeks. But typically, Sterling, it happens early on in the season or at the midpoint. The danger here is, as we've just talked about, you cannot afford to lose any more games from here on out, especially teams you're supposed to beat. Without Steph, they're 0-3 on the season. So even though it's San Antonio, you need Steph
Wemby,
Curry.
mind you.
Is he questionable or is he definitely not
playing
going?
Today?
Not playing, but there's a chance he could go Monday. It's a home and home. So they got him tonight. Correct. They got San Antonio tonight, and a home and home. They'll see San Antonio on Monday. There's a potential that Wemby, who, by the way, is just, my God.
He's special.
Real
man.
Like, everything we heard about the guy, I know he's playing in San Antonio, and you don't hear a lot about him, but that dude is delivering and then some.
Is he the greatest NBA prospect probably since LeBron, right?
I'd say he's exceeding LeBron.
Like, there was Zion, but I feel like the instant impact he's had on that team, they haven't won a lot, but that's a guy you build around and say, hey, next year, go get me a star next to him, and they're going to be a playoff team. Which is a good point, because if you're San Antonio, you can't say we're in this rebuild. Like, give us 2 to 3 to 4 years. No. This dude is, go get him in this offseason and start making your run next year. And you'll see the San Antonio Spurs once again right here on you won't see him here on 95.7 The Game, but of course you can catch all the action as the Warriors take on the Spurs tonight. And then, as I mentioned, you got a travel date, and then you'll see him again on Monday. No Wembanyama to go today. But Stephen Curry, just getting back to it, it almost works as though it's sort of this inadvertent load management, where it sort of benefited the Golden State Warriors. Not now, but in the past, where he's been out a couple of weeks. You don't want that to happen. But then towards the end of the season, you know, he's got his fresh legs because he sat out a good portion of the campaign. And that has sort of helped and benefited the Golden State Warriors. So this, in a weird way, because I think he was sort of, to your point, was hitting a wall, and it just looked as though the load on this guy and the expectations, the Warriors go as far as he'll take them offensively. It's a one-trick pony, with oftentimes it's all got to be about Steph. That him going down again, you don't want to lose Steph. You don't want anybody getting injured. But him having to take a week to 10 days off is not the worst thing in the world that can happen to Golden State Warrior fans. However, the timing, Sterling, is the big concern here. The timing depends on how many games he misses, though. If he misses 2 games against the Spurs, who are 13-50, you should be able to take care of business with Podziemski or Chris Paul or even Gary Payton II playing in Curry's place. But to your point again about Curry not hitting a wall, but maybe having tired legs, right? In his last 10 games, only 20 points per game, under 33% from 3. He missed a handful of free throws, only 86%. He was not Stephen Curry, the MVP that we have come to know and love in his past 10 games. But let's say he takes a week off and they beat San Antonio twice. You make up that Bulls game essentially, right? And let's say he's healthy by maybe Wednesday or maybe even next Saturday for the Lakers. You have the Lakers 2 more times this year. You have Dallas 3 more times this year with a game and a half separating you from both those teams. You can, in a way, overtake or at least inch your way back up those standings relatively soon, whereas if Curry misses 2 games, it's not the end of the world. So you don't have him against the San Antonio Spurs without Wembanyama. You're not going to have the big on your team, even if he's healthy, that can stop him anyways. But you're going to have guys like Chris Paul, Podziemski, Moody, Kuminga take that next step up of being, hey, like take Kuminga. You're the number 1 guy now, buddy. You have to go be the number 1 scorer. What does that pressure look like for him? I think Kuminga has been, and you have loved JK from the day he got in the Bay. From the night show a couple years ago, you have been on Kuminga's you-know-what, saying this guy is going to be a star. And right now we're seeing that come to fruition. That, hey, Kuminga looks like a star budding in front of our eyes. Now with no Steph, How does Draymond respond? How does Kuminga respond? How do the young guys that we mentioned that have been great in spots and then haven't been underperformed in spots? How does Podziemski play without Steph? Who facilitates? Who then becomes the number one scorer? For me, Jonathan Kuminga is the most important player for this offense now. He has to be your number one option. He's been the 2 for a month and a half now? Now go be my 1. Continue that ascension up into the star ranks of the NBA.
If you want proof on Steph Curry and load management, and when a guy gets into his mid-30s, soon to be 36 years of age, you don't have to look any further than what has transpired this past week. Now, keep in mind the Boston game where he was bad, but that was the end of a 5-game road trip, right, in which they went back-to-back going to New York and Toronto, which is always grueling, but then you tack on the fact that they had plane issues and didn't roll into Canada, and you got to go through customs. You get like an hour's sleep, and then you wrap things up in Boston. He had no legs. No. He was not effective from three-point territory. So. But then his next game out, and it's not coincidental where he has 3 days off, which is somewhat unusual in the NBA this time of the year. But look at his legs against Milwaukee. Just look at the way he played. You could clearly see that it was a different basketball player, that was the Steph turning back the clock. And you could just see that there was there was added energy. There was a hop in his step, and you could, that's from rest. And that's what happens when you're in mid-30s. And then you go back-to-back in the next game against Chicago, and it wasn't the Steph the night before that was, that was on the floor against the Chicago Bulls. It was a completely different version of Steph Curry. That's why getting back to, again, never want to miss Steph, but if you think about this in sort of a weird way, it's the best thing that could happen to the Golden State Warriors if he gets 10 days off and you're playing San Antonio. Now, you're going to have to steal some games against Dallas and or the Los Angeles Lakers. Anything more than a week becomes really problematic. But I think that this can benefit the Golden State Warriors as it has the last couple of years when they made playoff runs. Remember when they finished that year 15-5?
Oh, yeah.
He was out for a good portion of that season. And towards the end, when he could see the finish line, Steph could put it into another gear. He's on pace this year. I read this last night. He's on pace this year to play, I believe, 79 games.
Wow.
He hasn't played 70 games, more than 70 games, I want to say, since the 2016 season.
Jeez.
So this was inevitable almost to a certain degree that he was going to blow a tire. Getting back to the Golden State Warriors, and now what do you do now going forward? And thinking about tonight and again on Monday against San Antonio. While I agree with you, Jonathan Kuminga has taken strides, and he has to score the basketball and be that guy to a certain degree because I think it's going to be distributed throughout. What about Klay Thompson? And I say that because Klay will look to get his points, but what I'm afraid of is that Klay is like, okay.
Now it's my time.
Right? Daddy's out of the room. You need someone to score. And does he become that guy hunting shots again? That's the one thing I think you want to protect against.
Well, that's why you keep him on the bench. It's almost like a don't get out of your lane. We all love Klay Thompson here. Everyone in the NBA wants Klay Thompson to succeed. His bench role, which he has kindly accepted and has looked really good in, actually, I don't think Kerr even messes with Klay. He's comfortable now as that bench player, as that bench scorer for them that, hey, you can give us 20 off the bench any given night, 20 plus off the bench any given night. He is not going back into the starting lineup, and he's not becoming mentally my number one scorer again. Klay's a whole mental game with him. If he starts to believe I can start making shots, and he'll start jacking up, 15, 23s if he has to. He's just that kind of player. And if he believes in himself and it's actually working and he's making them, by all means, go ahead. But we've seen, especially last season, he will shoot you out of games. And the last thing you want without Steph Curry, without that guaranteed 20-plus points a night from Curry, you cannot have Klay saying, okay, I will lead you to the promised land. No, Klay. Be bench Klay. You can give us 15, 20 a night off the bench. Let Kuminga, let Draymond, let Chris Paul facilitate for the other guys. For you, just play your role and everything's going to be okay. They played 11 guys against Chicago. Like that is going to carry over, especially without Stephen Curry. I do want to go back to Steph, though, because this is almost, let's say he misses from today until next Friday, and he plays Saturday against Los Angeles. It's almost like another All-Star break for him, right? And when you go back, they lost or they beat the Jazz by 3 points the day before the All-Star break. They then played the Lakers, their first game out of the All-Star break, almost a week off, right? 7 days, basically. What did Steph do? 32 points, 8 rebounds. Golden State wins by 18. That's what you're hoping. He takes 3 games off. All of a sudden, boom, you get Stephen Curry back fresh. You get your offensive punch back, and you get 32 points, 8 rebounds, and an 18-point win against the Lakers next Saturday.
It's a real thing. It is a real thing. There is a cause and effect with Steph Curry and any player, for that matter. LeBron James is the same way. That when your central player on your basketball team that is you're most reliant on to score the ball and to facilitate and to do all these things is in his mid-30s, rest is a key, which is why, and LeBron is so good at this because he load manages throughout a game. If you ever watch him, he takes plays off. Yeah, no doubt. But which is why it's so key, Sterling, for this team to get the 6th seed. Now everybody wants, including Sacramento, including Dallas, including the Lakers and the Golden State Warriors, and you can throw the Pelicans into that mix. Nobody wants to be in that 7-8, 9-10 matchup, right? But I would say more so the Golden State Warriors have added incentive than anyone else. The reason being is what it is we just laid out. If you get that 6th seed, you get a week off.
Yep.
You get a whole week off. And for the Golden State Warriors and for a team that is in their mid-30s, a week off is the difference between making a serious run and a team much like last year, which had to go 7 games against Sacramento when it was all Steph and then just had nothing left in the tank against the Los Angeles Lakers. You could be looking at a similar scenario this year that for an aging team, getting rest, especially for one Steph Curry, is absolutely key. But I would throw Klay Thompson into that mix. I would throw Draymond Green as well as play. And Draymond Green, they have really tampered down his minutes. I think he's playing like 25, 26 minutes a game. And that's what happens when a guy gets into there. Again, when you're on the wrong side of 30, you have to keep an eye on these things. The Golden State Warriors, and we'll get into this throughout the majority of the show, now become, as I just laid out, this old team that much more reliant on the youth, which I think is now the identity of this basketball team. You're always going to have the foundational 3, right? But it's no longer about Steph, Draymond, and Klay. This is about the young players on this basketball team. That is the X factor. That is what's going to decide just how far you are going to go. And especially now, with the absence of Steph, I would say it's not so much Kuminga, but it's going to be about all these kids getting into passing lanes, taking charges, ripping rebounds, and running and filling lanes. Like that energy has got to be palpable over the next week without one Stephen Curry.
And I find it funny, too, because, the Warriors fans know, the whole 2 timelines thing. It was all preached of Wiseman and Poole and others that were going to be the next stage of Golden State Warriors basketball. Well, now they've moved off of, you can say, these projects or guys that are going to take a handful of years, and now you have young players, rookies, Trace Jackson Davis, that can block Giannis 3 times in a game. That are
four.
We had 4 blocks, but blocked Giannis 3 times. Unafraid to be...
No, he had Giannis 4 times.
I think it was only 3.
All right.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Ken, my man.
Help us out, Ken. But you have young players like Pajemski that can take charges, unafraid to get their hands dirty. Trace Jackson Davis, unafraid to crash the board. You have guys that are like this willing to do everything it takes to win. Take Trace Jackson Davis. At Indiana, he's their all-time blocks leader.
Yeah.
Like, he is a stud where you point to him and say, yeah, he isn't the biggest guy. He ain't the strongest guy, but he's fearless. Pajemski, fearless. All year long, from the moment those guys stepped on the court, you can tell they knew what it took to be a warrior, to play in this system. And now that's going to be called upon more than ever without Steph. And honestly, I think these guys, if it is only a week, you have 2 games against the Spurs and the Mavericks, I think they can sweep all those games. I think they played that well, and confidence is key for your young players. I think they're all playing well, from Kuminga to Moody to Pods and TJD. These guys look like they belong in the NBA. 2 of them are rookies. These guys look like, and I believe that they can go into Dallas. If they have to go into Los Angeles and beat a team like the Lakers. I think if you have that confidence behind you as a player, the the fearlessness they have to body up somebody bigger than them, it takes you a long way in the NBA. Look at Pat Beverly. He ain't the biggest guy, but he's feisty. Podziemski reminds me of Pat Bev. He's feisty. He wants to get into you, get into your body, and knock you down, run through you, but also he'll pass it out. Boom. Moody 3. Boom. Clay 3. These guys know how to play in this system where if Steph isn't going to play for a week, I believe these guys can win 3 of these 4 games ahead of them.
So Ken is just Mr. New York, Mr. Met. Ken, our star producer, has just blown into my ear that it was indeed 4 blocks. So 3 against Giannis.
Yes, but 4 total.
And then 1 against somebody else.
Thank you, Ken.
Ken, the next time you give information that doesn't jive what I'm saying, I'm gonna ignore you, brother.
Always tell me I'm wrong, Ken. Dan's always right.
You guys got it.
Here's the thing.
Whatever you want to do.
By the way, speaking of block shots, I just want to go to the break with this. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards, I'm just saying YouTube this. Last night, was it 2 nights ago?
It was a couple nights ago, yeah.
The block he had, which essentially saved the game. Just look at it. Like, it's that awesome. Dude is...
It's awesome.
He's real deal.
And on ESPN, they're saying it was, or it was Skip Bayless saying it wasn't that big of a deal. And I get Skip's got a shtick, but like, Skip, like, that was incredible what we just watched from Anthony Edwards.
Don't make me bring back the MPF list this early.
Most punchable face.
But Skip Bayless...
We haven't heard it in a long time.
Yeah, you'll go right to the top of most punchable faces if you want to hold on to that take. All right, phone lines are officially open. 888-957-9570. That's 888-957-9570. We're just getting started. We see you on the phone lines. We got to get to a break. When we continue, we'll break down the Golden State Warriors without Steph Curry as they take on the San Antonio Spurs tonight. Alongside Sterling Bennett, this is Dan Devone. Just getting started. Back with your calls and much more right after this.
Coolidge, I just want to thank you for making me feel so special. I earned cash back on debit for my dinner party groceries.
That's great, but with Discover Cashback Debit, we give everyone cash back on everyday purchases. Anything else I can help you with?
Do you like asparagus and mushroom sorbet? I've got leftovers.
Introducing Discover Cashback Debit, a checking account with cash back. It pays to Discover. Eligibility in terms of...
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
I like that. A little hard rock to get us going early on a Saturday. Not hard rock, but
this is hard rock. Some new metal. Some Rage Against the Machine.
Bulls on Parade, baby. I played that for Sterling and his Bulls.
Wow.
You can't say the lyrics, though, because they're a little dicey nowadays. But
welcome back to Warriors This Week. Alongside Sterling Bennett, it is Dan Navone and our man Ken, who's hitting his head up against the glass, listening to some strong tunage.
He's headbanging back there.
So the Golden State Warriors, losers to the Chicago Bulls last time out. Now get ready for the San Antonio Spurs. Once again, all the action can be heard right here on 95.7 The Game. It is a home and home, so just what the doctor ordered. You have no Steph. You need to steal a couple of games while he's on the men. Well, thank you, San Antonio. Although, if we learn anything against Chicago, is that you can't look past anybody, including the Bulls, without Wembanyama. As Golden State gets 2 against the San Antonio Spurs. They got help from nobody, and I mean 1 through 9 in the Western Conference. From the Thunder, the T-Wolves, the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Pelicans, the Suns, the Kings, the Mavericks, the Lakers, all in front of Golden State now, and all were winners in their last games. The Thunder with the longest winning streak at 2 games. So, the thing is that if you're hoping that someone's going to fall back to you, I think that was sort of the thought process that, Sacramento, are they for real? The New Orleans Pelicans, the wheel's going to start to come off. The Lakers, really that team? Our team's going to start losing games and rashes and just sort of fall back into the Golden State Warriors. That hasn't been the case to date. And the Golden State Warriors, if they are indeed going to walk down the Pelicans and the Suns for that 6th seed or even improve to the 8th or 7th seed, they're going to have to win some games and do it on their own. As Golden State, once again, with a perfect opportunity coming up tonight against the San Antonio Spurs. All right, phone lines, as I mentioned, are officially open. 888-957-9570. We kick things off in San Jose. Just give me Austin, who wants to get into the conversation. Austin, how's the week, buddy? How are you?
What's up, fella? Good to talk to you as always, Dan. And my young guy Sterling this weekend. I just want to calm down some of his exuberance about the Warriors, and we always appreciate the young guys and their exuberance that the Warriors are going to beat everybody ahead of them, even though they really haven't demonstrated at home. They haven't really demonstrated they can actually take control of their home court. The other night was disappointing for a lot of reasons. They should have closed that game out with or without Steph. And really going forward, guys, I just want to say, the Steph injury is kind of a blessing, even though it's kind of a dark blessing, but we're going to have a chance to, and I said to the guys the other day, this is an audition for me, for the youngsters. I want to see if they can execute and close out games, and knowing the Steph won't be around to save them, I want to see what these guys can do, and not just the young guys. Guys mentioned Clay, and Clay wanting to still prove he can do it. We got all these other sideline with Wiggins and all these guys. Now it's time to see who should we be looking at for next year. To me, it's all about auditions for next year. And as far as Kuminga, man, I love Kuminga, and I've loved him from day one. But I'm not seeing him yet as a number 2 even yet. I don't think he's reached the point of being designated a number 2. And Sterling was talking about number 1. Do you realize how hard it is to be a number 1 in the NBA? That's a very difficult leap. So I think that Kuminga's on auditioning. Everyone else is auditioning for the next year. I think that's going to make it fun. And we'll see who gets contracted out next year. All right, guys, that's all I got. Thanks.
Austin, way to kick things off. Always strong with Austin leading things with what I think is really insightful knowledge, and that's just a really good way to look at things. When Steph is out, the only thing I would disagree, Austin, a little bit, it's not so much next year, but I would say and put it in the framework of this year. Like, with Steph out, all right, here's your opportunity, Moses Moody. Trace Jackson-Davis plays a different position, but everybody now moves up a spot right in the rotation. So exactly. Trace Jackson-Davis, now you're going to get more run. Are you worthy of somebody that we can rely on in the playoffs and or towards the end of the season? Because I think these are still moving pieces, but I think that it's a great way to look at things, that this continues to be an opportunity for a lot of players who, again, sometimes the Warriors will go 12 deep, but now with Kevon Looney and Dario Saric sort of moved out of the rotation, and it's about time. It's still a bunch of young players that are still trying to prove to the coach as well as to everybody else that they're worthy of some significant minutes for the Warriors, especially in the most important part of the campaign.
And no one is saying that Kuminga is going to be a bona fide 1 against everybody. Kuminga has to be a one now without Steph. That can be a game. That can be 2 games. But I think, like you're saying, Dan, the young guys have to prove to Kerr that they can play in these pivotal moments, play in a playoff game. But I also think when you see who's on that bench, Saric, Kevon Looney had his record snapped because the younger guys have proven to Steve Kerr as of recently that, hey, I deserve to play minutes over the vets that are proven in this league that have helped you win a title, like Kevon Looney. Now, Looney has struggled this year more than previous seasons, and I think TJD gives you something Looney won't. He's someone that can actually get a handful of blocks, is going to be healthy almost the entirety of the season. Looney, Iron Man, I get that, but TJD will give you a presence in the paint Kevon just won't. He'll be a rebounder, but TJD is a shot blocker, whereas Looney's a smaller center, right? But going back to Austin's point of, let's not be too optimistic. You can beat San Antonio twice without Steph. I believe that. Some way, somehow, you can beat San Antonio twice. Dallas, much tougher game. You don't have Steph, you can easily lose that one. But if you get Steph back against the Lakers, okay. Steph, fresh legs, should feel great, should find a shot again. Didn't get 24 in that game, you should win that one against LA. Then you're at home against the Knicks, who are banged up right now. You have the Grizzlies, who you're a far better team than Memphis are. I get you lost on it and MLK Day out there, but you should beat Memphis at home. Pacers are a good team, fast, young. You probably lose to them, but then you have the Timberwolves on the road with no Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, who you can play off the court and have done so year after year. Like the next handful of games, week and a half of games, you can win 4 or 5 of these ones and find yourself back in that 8-7 seed conversation again. So no one's saying if there's no Steph, you're going to go far. But I do think over the next week and a half, you can survive, maybe even improve your standings without Stephen Curry.
I think it'll be interesting to see not the next 2 games against San Antonio, but really what I want to keep an eye on is that Dallas game in Dallas when you take on Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. And if you don't have Steph, is there any chance that you can stay in that game and steal one from the Mavericks? Because if you do, that really changes the complexion in terms of instilling a level of confidence that this team has not had, especially with this new core. That if you can prove to yourselves, as well as everybody else, that you can beat a team like that of Dallas that sits ahead of you in the seeding as you try and walk down that 6th seed, in Dallas against Luka Doncic and company, that goes a long, long way as far as this dispelling the whole idea that this is just a one-dimensional team, although it is. I would say the only other team that's comparable to the Golden State Warriors are the Denver Nuggets in terms of being centric around one player. When Nikola Jokic comes out of a game or misses a game, the Denver Nuggets are just clearly not the same team. And that's just simply because he's the best player in basketball.
Right.
The Celtics have won without Tatum. The Lakers won last night without LeBron James. There are teams you don't want to do it over a long period of time, but I think the Golden State Warriors need to prove that this isn't just all about Steph as it was a year ago. That may be the case, but I think if somehow that they can instill a level of confidence and prove to everybody that there is definitely a youth movement and it's legitimate, and we just beat Dallas at Dallas, that I think goes a long way in terms of making a serious run at whatever's going to happen to the postseason this year. Getting back to Trayce Jackson-Davis, and I got to work in Steve Kerr here. So Coach Kerr, after that big game of the 4 blocks and the big showing he had against the Milwaukee Bucks, talked about Trayce Jackson-Davis, how he now has to get time. He's got to get run.
Ready for the playoffs.
Right. And I hate going after Kerr because Kerr's the man. And look, I don't want to be that bozo who's just, bottom feeding and the coach sucks after their team loses. But I've maintained this all along. You wouldn't have to rush him to play these, this last 19 games of the season to see whether he's ready and or to get him ready for the postseason, as you said, Coach, because you should have been playing him all along. I've said this going back a month and a half ago. Trayce Jackson-Davis needs run. Anybody could see that he could supplant both Kevon Looney and Dario Saric in the rotation over a month ago. Steve Kerr, if there's one fault, if there's one big giant wart on Steve Kerr this year as a head coach, he's just been really slow to the party as far as recognizing that these young players are legit.
Well, that goes back to Moses Moody as well, where Moses Moody wouldn't play games. In fact, Steve Kerr told him, hey, you're not playing tonight. Don't worry about it. Go out there, be the 13th man, the 12th guy on my bench, and just sit there and just relax. You're not playing at all tonight. Well, then there have been games during the year where they've needed Moses, and he's come off the bench. Always Ready Moses is his nickname, right? And I think, like you're saying, Kerr might have been slow to kind of get the young guys involved. And I get it, right? You have Looney, you have Saric, guys you're paying more money to or have a higher draft status. You want to get them involved. You had a vision as to how they fit in your system. Like, take Saric. He ain't playing no more for a good reason. He has shot himself off the court. But going into the year, Chris Paul, you got Saric, they have a great chemistry together. Let's have them be two guys off our bench to give us some important minutes, hopefully in bigger games in the season. But now you realize, hey, like we have something here with Trayce Jackson-Davis. And so I do understand Kerr being slow to make that change, but now you want to talk about young guys needing to bring the energy. Yeah, Gary Payton II, not a young guy when it comes to Kuminga.
But plays like one.
But right. He can guard a center if he has to. A guy who will bring you instant energy off your bench. Trayce Jackson-Davis, Moody, Kuminga. If they can win the next two games against San Antonio and go win to Dallas, feel good about themselves headed into Dallas, going, okay, we just beat the Spurs, not great teams, but we did it without Steph. It's like being a young person in the world. I did it without my parents. I did that all by myself. You start to believe in yourself again, or believe in yourself for the first time, that instills confidence. See Kuminga getting blocks or dunks, out there smiling, kind of flexing. I want to see that kind of JK. I want to see Moody, the Arkansas Moody, right? Where he's out there getting you 10 points a night, hitting a couple of threes, going, wow, he's a dog. If you can do that without Steph, believe in yourself without Steph, prove to Kerr that, hey, without our best player, we are playing within the system that you want us to play within, playing good, smart, clean, turnover less basketball. That'll go a long way for how much rope he wants to give these young guys come playoff time.
Yeah, I think the Dallas Maverick game is really significant. That's the one I want to see. Do you get blown out because Steph isn't there and it's Dallas?
You might.
I mean, it's a possibility. Or is it a Warrior team that can be competitive without your best player?
What would you consider a success? Let's say they beat San Antonio twice without Steph. Go into Dallas, no Steph. Even if they lose, but it's close, it's tight, it's last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, it's down to the wire. Do you find that as a successful game against Dallas, even if you lose?
I'm one of those, I find it hard to find any level of success when you lose a basketball game. So a loss is a loss. But I hear what you're saying. I guess there's some feel good that you can take away from it. I think that, listen, if you're going to be close, then beat them. The question becomes just how apparent is it, and maybe San Antonio doesn't provide this for the Golden State Warriors, but just how apparent is it without Steph Curry that you're not a good basketball team, and or are you? And I think that measuring stick will come on Wednesday against the Dallas Mavericks, who, by the way, are, this was the hottest team in basketball, last week, and a good team, but a team that with Luka Doncic, and anytime you have Luka Doncic, who is, again, having another MVP type season, did you see this? He's the first player in NBA history to have 4 consecutive triple doubles with 35 points or more.
Wow.
Nobody's ever done that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he's in the middle of that right now. But here's the thing with Luka. He don't play defense, man.
No, he does not.
He don't like defense. And what they simply try and do, because they're not a good defensive team under Jason Kidd, is they'll try and outscore you. And I think that's what you have to consider when you take on someone like that of the Dallas Mavericks, which makes things that much more difficult, because if you're going to get into a shootout with a team and the numbers get into the 120s or the 130s, well, winning a game like that without Steph Curry becomes really difficult.
You cannot go into a shootout against the Mavericks without Steph and expect to win, unless Klay is dropping 33 and Kuminga is giving you 22. You just can't. But I do think that it's almost a good thing Wemby's not playing tonight. It gives them that kind of free game to go out there and just win. The Spurs stink. They can beat you maybe, but without Wemby, it gets a lot harder for them. You beat them tonight without Wemby, You beat them on Monday, hopefully with Wembanyama. Then you get that confidence over more so into Dallas. And you say, hey, we're going into the Dallas Mavericks game. We ain't got Steph. I think that game becomes a massive matchup for Gary Payton II. Put him on Luka. Yeah, Luka's bigger, but I think GP2 can handle Luka, be physical with him. Yeah, Luka gets the kind of ticky-tack fouls and whatnot, but I do think that you want to frustrate him. He's always crying to refs. Always crying. It's a foul here, foul there. You want to frustrate him? You put Gary Payton II on him, I think we're going to be in for a good one on Wednesday against Dallas. I really do.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really shuts him down. It's
hard to. It's very hard to.
Yeah, I mean, he can
frustrate
him to
him
a certain degree. Yeah. You know what's interesting is when we talk about the younger players, there's one guy that we don't mention, which is sort of interesting because I think as of early as last year, if Steph was out of a game, if you were to look at the Warriors statistically, although he missed a good chunk of the season or 2 years ago, or really since his arrival, Andrew Wiggins has been sort of, the number 2 as far as giving you those sort of 18 to 20 points.
Right.
But he has fallen so far off the map here when it comes to the Golden State Warriors that while he's still starting, I guess I'm sort of curious, has Moses Moody sort of replaced him in a way, as not as a starter, but in terms of getting the more significant minutes? It was Moody that sort of, leapfrogged him and was closing the game, and not Andrew Wiggins the other night against Chicago.
It's tough too because Wiggins missed some time, so how long will it take to kind of get those legs back under him, find the shot again?
But how many times do we have to go through that scenario?
You are right. Who knows exactly what's happening with him off the court? Hope everything's okay. But when it just comes to on the court, how much patience do you have? We know what Wiggins can be. We saw it a handful of years ago when this team won a title. He was important to winning a championship here in the Bay. But in the last couple years, off the court issues has affected him on the court where he's on, he's off. He's on, he's off. There's no consistency with him. If you ask me today, who gives me a more consistent output every single night, Moody or Wiggins, I would have to pick Moses Moody. I can rely on Moses Moody over Andrew Wiggins currently. Maybe in certain situations, no, but in clutch time, I have been able to the past couple games. I think when Wiggins is gone, he's starting in place of you, and he played well. Like Moses Moody has been, and I think he always has been this way. I think he is one of the best plug-and-play players the Golden State Warriors have. Off the bench, he'll get you a good 6 points. Starting, he'll give you 10 points. He will give you everything he has for every minute he's on the court. Blocks, steals, alley-oop dunks. He can really do it all without being a star. He's someone you say, I want to have on my team. And for a roster now that doesn't have their best player and an inconsistent Wiggins, like the Golden State Warriors have been arguably the most inconsistent team in the entire NBA, and they've just lost their most consistent player. To me, Moses Moody is one person I point to and say, hey, you can give me the most consistent minutes of this entire roster. I would like to see his role expanded, maybe even over Wiggins, even if Andrew's still on the court in some way.
Well, I wouldn't start him. And I guess the reason why I wouldn't start Moses Moody, because I think that what it is you just laid out is an apt description of him as a good role player. Yeah. Like he is usually if you're going to win a title,
like a Shane Battier,
you have guys like that. Every team has their Alex Carusos, have their Drew Holidays. Although Drew Holiday is clearly a star, but there's those guys that are just, they do everything well. They play defense. They don't give up on any plays because it's just simply not in their DNA. He's a good, in a perfect team, he's a good 7th, 8th guy in the rotation. Maybe 6 as he continues to mature. But he is not someone I see, at least at this stage, as being a starter. So I have no issues with Andrew Wiggins. My problem with Wiggins is just like that of probably everybody else out there in Dub Nation, is it's so frustrating. I mean, when you think about the Warriors, it's sort of feast or famine, where you have these players that are clearly sort of now, they've peaked and they're now beginning to descend down the mountain as far as their career is concerned because they're at that age where they're in their mid-30s. And then you have these raw kids who are just running around, just going nuts, hair's on fire, just doing whatever. And the one guy is in the sweet spot, because when you look for teams that are like in that sort of late 20s to mid-20s, that's when the Golden State Warriors were at their very best.
Yes.
Right? That's when you couldn't stop the Warriors. because Steph, Clay, Draymond, all 26, 27, sort of in that range. You look at Denver. I mean, it's not by accident that you got Michael Porter Jr., Jokic, and Jamal Murray, all in that 26 to 30 range.
And
like that's the sweet
career.
spot.
Exactly.
Right. That's what you're looking for. And the Warriors right now, they're either too old or they're too young. And the one guy who's in that sweet spot is Andrew Wiggins, along with Looney. But Looney looks like, he's Grady from Sanford and Son, and he's 147 years old. But you got Andrew Wiggins, who's 28. I want to say 29 now, maybe. He should be
probably around there.
Peak guy. Like he should be
able to bridge the gap in between the two groups.
But he's so damn frustrating. It's like, which Andrew Wiggins are we going to get tonight? Oh, he was really good. We're going to build off of that. Then he disappears. Not only physically, but he'll disappear on the court. Where you're like, really, you just played 12 minutes? I couldn't even tell.
There are games in a row. The Bucks. I didn't know Wiggins played. Bulls. Wiggins played. I didn't know.
He was good against the Bulls.
He was, but there are times even when he's good, you still don't notice him because he's not doing anything flashy. He's kind of a grinder. He's a grindy, kind of grimy player where he's not loud. He's not going to bring attention to himself, but without Steph, you really do need Wiggins to show up.
As he's done in the past. That now becomes the big question. 888-957-9570. We'll put this out there to Dub Nation and to all of you listening this week on Warriors This Week. Who is it that now steps to the forefront, grabs the reins, and becomes the number one, so to speak, for the Golden State Warriors? Or is it more of a collective? Is it Clay giving you 16 to 18 points, Jonathan Kuminga at 18 to 20? Here comes Chris Paul giving you big numbers, shooting threes. Who are the players? Is Trace Jackson-Davis going to come out of nowhere and give you some points as well as the good defense? What is it that the Warriors will do as far as replacing the nearly 27 points a game that obviously Steph Curry provides this basketball team, but now with his absence, I think becomes the big question. You seem to think it's going to be Jonathan Kuminga. I think Jonathan Kuminga is certainly, he could be that guy. But Kuminga is also at a stage where, he's played well, but not that he disappears, but the consistency hasn't been there over the last couple of weeks. And while I love Jonathan Kuminga, putting him as that guy, I don't know that that's necessarily the recipe. I think it has to be more of something where it's 1 through 6. And it's one of those where you look at the box score and, wow, the Golden State Warriors winners today is they had 7 guys in double digits, which they've been able to do in the past.
I do think Kuminga maybe doesn't need to be the one, but I think he's the most capable of being the one of the guys you currently have on your roster.
And he does it a different way. Obviously,
he's been shooting more threes, though, which I don't like, but he's been shooting them.
Yeah, and the thing with that is that it's so tempting because they're letting him shoot it. And if he begins to, you don't want him to do it.
But if he hits a couple.
If he begins, because I don't know that, it's way too early in the guy's career. He's 21 years of age.
Yes.
And the guy is in his 3rd season. To say that he can't shoot threes.
Right.
It's like you're not, no, that's not the case.
Kawhi was a defensive-only player until year 3 or 4.
If he starts shooting threes and now you got to go out on him,
yeah,
like that opens up a whole nother planet for this guy. All right, we'll continue to talk about Jonathan Kuminga. Who do you think replaces Steph Curry and gives the Warriors big numbers as now number 30 will be down for at least the next couple of days? All right, we'll continue here on 95.7 The Game. It's Sterling Bennett and it's Dan Avone back with more on Warriors This Week right after this.
He's the best in the biz.
With 2, with 1, the jumper's up. Good! Klay Thompson with the bucket!
Tim Roy's Call of the Game.
Watch this.
Warriors This Week continues on 95.7 The Game.
And what a week it was. The Golden State Warriors started things, getting embarrassed by that of the Boston Celtics out in Beantown, which anytime the Warriors come to town, Boston,
they're ready.
There's an asterisk next to that game. It's still very much fresh on the minds of the Boston Celtics, what happened to the NBA Finals a couple of years ago. And they took care of business. They embarrassed Golden State. The Warriors then bounced back against another power out of the East, that being the Milwaukee Bucks, with a 35-point win. And then Thursday happened. The inexplicable loss to that of the Chicago Bulls. Yeah, really quick, just to get back to the Boston Celtics. They went head-to-head because just to show you how they won that game by more than 50. They've beaten 4 teams this year, I believe, by more than 50 points. But it's just one game, right?
Right.
And just to sort of just when you were about to anoint them as this juggernaut, the Boston Celtics, did you see the week that they had?
I did not know.
They blow a 22-point lead to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then they go head up with the Denver Nuggets, which is thought to be sort of
NBA Finals preview.
The preview of the 2 best teams, the Nuggets and the Boston Celtics. That is the NBA Finals as we know it this year. And, they blow a game. They didn't blow a game, but they weren't very good down the stretch. And when you think about, sort of the mental hurdles and the mental gymnastics that Jason Tatum and the core of that team, the Jaylen Browns of the world and the Horfords, are still trying to get that proverbial monkey off the back that they can be a team that does well in the postseason. While they dominate in the regular season, and they did what it is they did to the Golden State Warriors, they still haven't done a damn thing when it comes to being that team and winning an NBA championship.
Do you buy into them at all?
I don't.
Neither do I.
And the reason being is I don't buy into Jason Tatum, and he can prove me wrong. He'll get another opportunity this year.
Young guy.
But you've got to prove to me that here's the difference. Listen up, young fella. I love putting on my avuncular hat and teaching the youngster. And Ken, you're a young kid as well. Sit around, kids.
My 27-year-old self.
Is that, there is the players in the NBA that can do it during the regular season. But then when it comes, obviously, to crunch time, to join that elite, rarefied group of Steph Curry, LeBron James, even Giannis, who is now 1-1, Jokic. If you want to be regarded as one of the best, it does not matter what it is it does matter to a certain degree what you do during the regular season, but it's crunch time, and it's crunch time during the biggest games of the postseason, and breaking through that you put people on your back. That's when you get anointed and you get the proverbial stamp, okay, welcome to the club. He has yet to do that, and I'm not so sure that he can. But obviously another opportunity to prove it this year.
Would you put Tatum in the same category as Jimmy Butler or like a Dame Lillard? A guy who is really good and can carry a franchise to the playoffs. And in big moments can show up, but ultimately is not going to be the reason as to why you win in a 7-game series against, a team in the conference finals or the NBA finals.
The only difference being is that I think Jason Tatum, certainly when it comes to Jimmy Butler, I think always overachieves.
Okay.
I don't think that Jimmy Butler has the sort of pieces to play with like that of a Jason Tatum.
I agree.
Jason Tatum, they basically said, okay, who do you want this year to get over the hump? They went and got Porzingis.
You want a wide open Jaylen Brown against the Warriors, what they want.
And they get Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
They've got every base covered.
Okay.
Like that is a legitimate team. Milwaukee and Dame Lillard don't have that, and Jimmy Butler is always sort of overachieving with teams that he's with, because I'm a big Jimmy Butler fan. Jason Tatum has it all. So there are no excuses at this point. It's just now, are you that dude? Okay. Like, are you one of those guys that can put a team on its back and forget about, like, we got so many stars. I heard him say this after a game in which he lost to the Denver Nuggets going straight up with Jokic and company. He said, I don't want to hijack the game. We have too many stars on this team. I don't need to suddenly take over. Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
hijack the damn game.
You are the star of the, you're Stephen Curry, by all intents and purposes, has had stars around him, the betterment or the better half of his career. If someone's going to take over the game, it is Stephen Curry. Kobe Bryant had Shaq and others, Pau Gasol, Ron Artest, and other players around him that, were good all-star players, but Kobe Bryant took over the team. Mamba mentality is a thing for a reason. I think to your point, what you're saying is that Jason Tatum can certainly show he has the Mamba mentality, but as of now, he just doesn't have that killer in him.
Steph Curry has hijacked so many games, he may as well be a terrorist at this point.
Still doing it.
All right, phone lines open now at 888-957-9570. Join the conversation. We started with Tony B. hanging out in San Francisco, California. Tony B., what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning. You guys bringing the energy this morning. I appreciate it. So what I got this morning is the Golden State Warriors this year are just an emotional roller coaster. And I was feeling really, really high after that win in against Milwaukee. And then I was feeling the doom and gloom yesterday. And you guys are bringing me back up a couple degrees now that I guess maybe there's a chance that Steph's not going to be out for so long. So I'm feeling that. I'm feeling good. I think these young guys, especially Moses Moody, I mean, to me, there's no question. Moses Moody is the man over Wiggins, and I hate to say this, but I think he's even got something on Clay right now in terms of his energy and what he brings to the game. He reminds me of Looney a couple years ago. Just gets in there and does his job, doesn't talk a whole lot, and just plays basketball. So, great show. Appreciate hearing you guys on Saturday morning, and looking forward to the playoffs.
Thanks, Tony B. There's a truck that's about to back up and roll them over.
Watch out!
But Tony B makes a really good point. I think
Clay, though?
Moses Moody?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he means getting minutes. Well, maybe he does. Yeah, I mean, no, he's.
See, the way I took it was more than Wiggins, more than Clay. And Clay has these spurts still, where, like we talked about earlier, that he will assert himself into a game.
So was Tony B saying...
It's like the way they play.
Okay.
Is that like Wiggins will not assert himself sometimes, where you will not know he's on the court. Moody, he will assert himself. He'll make his presence known and felt. That's how I took the call. Was that okay? Like, yeah, minutes-wise, maybe even play-wise, Moody isn't better than Clay or Wiggins, but I do think asserting themselves on the court, having that presence, that's where Moody, I think, sets himself apart from guys like Clay and Wiggins currently.
I always feel like somehow we're giving Klay Thompson a bad rap.
I do agree with that, yeah.
And I think Klay Thompson has really, really embraced and over-exceeded expectations in his new role coming off the bench.
He could have easily said, I'm not doing that. And I think there'd be a portion of the fan base that would say, yeah, it's Klay Thompson. This guy's won 4 NBA titles. You have not won without him. And Klay said, no, I'm good. I'm starting. I don't want to do that. I think there would have been a handful of people that said, yeah, like, that makes sense. But Klay's like, no, like, I'm a team player. I get it. I'm on the, I'm going towards the end of my career. I can see the sun setting in the future. I know it's going to end eventually. Maybe in 2 years, once Steph and Dre and Curry's contracts are all up. But good. I think Klay deserves a lot of credit as to embracing that 6th, 7th man role.
Well, I don't know that he had necessarily a choice in the matter.
Probably not, but...
Yeah, no, you're right.
He could have been fickle towards it.
Right. He could have come off the bench and had an attitude issue.
Right.
Like he could have been, I hate mentioning this name, but it could have been Jordan Poole-esque in a weird way and create that bad mojo.
Kelly Oubre, who was here in Golden State, he didn't want to be on the bench.
Exactly. Good point. Good pull. But I think Klay also deserves credit because as much as we talk about, well, we don't want you hunting shots, like that is, he always gets, a lot of heat for that. And that's not what he's been doing, though. To his credit, he has looked to make the late pass. I think the pick and roll with him and Trace Jackson-Davis, I think he really is the one who sort of unlocked Trace Jackson-Davis even before Chris Paul, because Chris Paul was hurt in terms of that pick and roll. It was Klay Thompson that was looking for him.
Yeah.
And was finding him. And they clearly developed a rapport. Who would have thought that those two on the same page and becoming a lethal combination? But that's clearly what's taken place. I think he's played within the design and the flow of the offense. I think that he's shooting threes that present themselves. He's not, quote unquote, just looking for his shots or trying to be Klay of 37 points in a quarter. He does, however, and I do have an issue with this. Man.
Let me know.
It's the heat check. Like, I think that phrase has got to be eradicated. If I'm a head coach, and it's not just relegated to Klay Thompson, but I am going to use him as an example. The idea of a heat check, in other words, you're saying you're a selfish basketball player. It's like it's one of the stupidest things that I think has just been accepted into the lexicon of NBA basketball. Well, it's okay. It's a heat check. It is never okay to shoot a basketball with 3 guys draped on you off of 1 foot leaning to your left, and then you clank the thing and it leads to a run out and a bucket the other way. That's just selfish, ignorant basketball.
It's a turnover at that point.
And for whatever reason, well, it's a heat check. You can still be, you can still be in a. I understand it that when a guy's got it going, you want to ride it, but you can still be a little bit judicious in the shots that you're taking. This idea, and Klay Thompson is the worst offender of this. This idea, I've hit my last 3 and I'm Klay Thompson. I'm game 6 Klay Thompson. Remember that? That now I've got, I have the luxury of shooting from anywhere, anytime, regardless of whether we're trailing or win. Forget about the context of the game.
He'd be at Fisherman's Wharf jacking up threes if he could.
It's a heat check. Yeah. I've hit my last 3. I get this. And
right.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's almost as though Steve Kerr and other coaches are like, well, it's a heat check. What?
Then it's off back iron.
It's just this. No, that's not an excuse. A bad shot is a bad shot. Yeah. And I understand you want to ride a guy's hot. I totally get being in that flow, man. I played this game like at the YMCA level and down at Moscone Park and getting run at the Panhandle. I know what it's like to feel it, but I'm just saying that doesn't allow you to go where it is that the likes of a Klay Thompson want to take it. And you can almost, I guarantee you can set your watch to it. It is going to happen as sure as the sun coming up in the morning, that if he's in one of those flows, that he's going to get it and jack it no matter where the hell he is on the floor.
You let Klay jack it, right?
Thank you. Our shout out to the 510. We do see you. Klay is now jacking it. But no, you feel me, Sterling? It's
I do.
The heat check, I don't know. You don't necessarily have to agree with me, but the idea of it's a heat check, it's understandable. Well, that being just understood and part of the fabric of the game is something that I have a hard time with.
Well, take Mickey D on the First NorCal Credit Union YouTube chat. They're up by 13 against Chicago. What do they start doing? Jacking up threes. It's like instead of allowing teams like the Bulls or others in the past to narrow that lead down, make your lead tighter and tighter and tighter, and put themselves in a position to get back in the game, you can stay hot within the offense. You don't have to jack up. Say you make 3 threes in a row. You're feeling good about yourself. You can stay within the offense and guess what? Continue to be the hot player on the court. Like Stephen Curry might be, him having a heat check 3 from the logo is more excusable than Klay Thompson has been this year, but even Steph, I do think, albeit has had his heat check 3s, would also say, hey, if Kevon Looney's open in the paint, if I'm not the open man, I'll pass it along because I know, guess what? I can either get myself a better shot later. How many times do you see Steph double covered, passes it off, and finds his shot off a screen elsewhere on the exact same possession? Happens all the time. Klay's not doing that. I think that right there is what kills Golden State at times. You're up 13. You can extend your lead still. You can still be the hot player on the court, but play within the offense.
I wanted to switch gears and talk about the return of Bob Myers.
Okay.
Coming back to Chase. He came back as a color analyst for the broadcast, which was nationally televised on ESPN with Mike Breen as the play-by-play voice. And first of all, Bob Myers did a really good job.
Yeah.
Did you listen to the game or watch the game?
I was here.
You were here. So, yeah, I can tell you he was, and I'm overly critical on these sort of things. And he was very conversational, easy to listen to. And just, picked his spots. And obviously, he's a bit of a homer. If I'm a Milwaukee Buck fan, I'm like, yeah, he's just seeing this through the lens of a Golden State Warrior. And well, why not? He was the GM up until a year ago, and a good one. Or was he? I'm seeing a lot on the chat line here, but I still think it's a little awkward for him to come back and have to talk about that was Trace Jackson Davis's big game, might have been his best game. As well as Podziemski played well in that contest, and to talk about these two players and I know they sort of joked about it, but would he have drafted those guys? I'll answer that for you. Hell no.
No.
He's not drafting Trayce Jackson-Davis and Podziemski. I think it's bittersweet. Obviously, he comes home, and you got to like Bob Myers because he's got a sense of humor and he reads the room. But I still think that there is a awkward sort of, like, your replacement, Mike Dunleavy, just found two guys, and I mean two dudes that were buried in that draft that have really saved the season for the Golden State Warriors in a lot of ways. And
also, they had the nice video package for him. He gets cheered, but did you hear what he said about Draymond, either before or after?
No.
I think it was after Draymond, they got a tech or whatever, and he said, like, well, I don't have to talk to him, so I'm pretty happy about that after the game. And, like, he's obviously being lighthearted about it, but some fans didn't like that of, like, oh, like, are you taking a shot at Draymond? I didn't see it that way, but it's like, yeah, like, that does wear on you. But I think for Bob coming back to Golden State, I'm sure there is a sense of, like, I wish I didn't have to leave or you know, not that there's unfinished business, but I'm sure it's like, well, you go to your former employer and you're like, I don't want to be back here sometimes. Like, people don't want to go to the job they currently have. Like, why would you want to go back to your previous job if things, well, didn't end not well, just didn't end how you wanted them to? Like, for Bob Myers at ESPN, like, he has to sometimes talk negatively towards his former team, who he loves. Like, that can put someone in an uncomfortable position. And I do think Bob, being the businessman he is, doesn't like being put in that position. And so to be on ESPN and be like, oh, there's two guys in Trayce and Brandon that I didn't draft, probably wouldn't have picked playing well, then Draymond's out here getting texts. Like, it does kind of make you feel a little like this is an awkward place for me to be in right now.
Well, I don't know if it's, I think that having to talk about Trayce Jackson-Davis and Podziemski specifically is a little bit maybe sort of, I wouldn't even say uncomfortable. It's sort of obvious that when he's like, wow, this Trayce Jackson-Davis is a hell of a player, I sure as hell wouldn't have drafted him.
Right.
I think that writing's sort of on the wall. I don't think anything else is really uncomfortable. I think he loves the Bay Area. I think he genuinely, I used to see the dude during the pandemic. We used to run the same steps out in Pacific Heights. I mean, I think he's a San Francisco guy. He got the Bay Area, and I think that the bond between him and Steve Kerr is legitimate. Like, I think that's a true friendship, and I think he genuinely appreciates the area and loves what it is that he built. I'm just saying that when as a broadcaster, and maybe it was true to a certain degree when Mark Jackson had to get in front of a mic and talk about the Golden State Warriors that suddenly were this team that were very, very good. It's similar in that, I now have to talk about this team, and I'm talking about Podziemski, and I'm talking about Trayce Jackson-Davis, and these are two guys that were drafted by my successor, and I'm the guy that drafted James Wiseman.
Right. Do you think he still wears that shame a little bit?
Oh, he has to.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
You could not.
Him and probably Jordan Poole to a degree, right? Like, he was there when everything went down with them, and I'm not bringing it up to bring it up.
He signed the extension with Jordan.
Exactly,
Poole, right?
That's what I mean. And then now he's gone.
Yeah, I think that the James Wiseman miss. I've always sort of maintained this is that when you have this rare opportunity to pick in the lottery as frequently as they did over those 2 years, and you still have a Hall of Fame core, and they're still at the time in their sort of early 30s, like, you have this rare chance because everybody talks about, oh, show me a dynasty where it ended well. It never does. It never does. Well, you have this one opportunity, I believe, to abridge and sort of keep that train going down the track. Mm-hmm. If you hit on these guys, like if you got the number 2 in the lottery right, like, and then you hit on Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, you have that chance now to be one of those teams. Maybe the San Antonio Spurs when Kawhi Leonard sort of stepped in there. Like, it doesn't happen, but you had this rare opportunity to have that torch being passed down. But missing on James Wiseman, I think, really set this team back. How often are they going to get a number 2 pick in the lottery?
To take it back to football, it's like when San Francisco had a lost season in 2018. What happened in 2019 when Nick Bosa is sitting there for him? You can't afford to miss when you get up in the top 5, top 2, like the Niners did and the Warriors did. You are not going to find yourself in that position rarely ever again, if ever again, with Steph and Clay and Draymond. And so, yes, missing on Wiseman certainly stunk. We got a couple second-round picks for him back. But I do think for Bob, and maybe he doesn't feel this way, but I'm sure there is a sense of like, man, like what could have been had I hit on that pick? Had it not been James Wiseman? I know certain people want, LaMelo Ball. That probably wouldn't have fit either, but like, had you just made that the right pick, whoever it would have been.
Yeah, and see, when you see what it is that Dunleavy did,
yeah.
And again, we're not coming down. Let me just backtrack. This isn't, we're not
we love
trashing Bob Myers.
We love Bob Myers.
Let's just put this preface by saying that when it comes to the NBA draft, especially the lottery, man, even the number 1 pick or the number 2 pick, it's you're rolling the dice.
It's really a crapshoot.
You calculate your risk, but it's a risk nevertheless. But when you think about some of those guys that went later that are now impact players that were on the board, I don't know, man. I'm thinking that Dunleavy might have pulled the trigger on Halliburton. That Dunleavy might have seen something in Alperen Şengün. He might have been that guy that's like, because if he can pick Podziemski out of the boys' choir,
right,
and he can find somebody like Trace Jackson Davis in the second round, who's to say that
Halliburton gets picked for you? Maybe.
I mean,
who knows?
So, yeah.
But talking about Bob's misses and his tenure later in Golden State. Like Mike Dunleavy, for all the heat he got during his first offseason here, it's a trade Jordan Poole and a lot of maneuvering, getting Chris Paul. Fans did not like that at first. But I think now, 5 months in, 6 months into the season, I think Warrior fans are like, Mike Dunleavy's done a hell of a job here for the Warriors. Finding kind of diamonds in the rough, going getting Chris Paul. And going back to Stephen Curry for a second, Chris Paul was going to be a massive factor depending on how long Steph Curry's out. Like, you can go to Jordan Poole, and when Jordan Poole was here, he can give you 22 a night. He'd also give you 10 turnovers and blow you a game late because he wasn't playing smart. Chris Paul might give you 6, 8 a night. He won't turn the ball over. He'll facilitate for the other guys. He'll let Clay jack it up whenever he wants to within the means of the offense. And he'll help facilitate for Trace Jackson Davis and Kuminga and Moody and others in the offense as well. But like smart getting Chris Paul, knowing, hey, Curry's gonna get hurt eventually. We have to have a guy that's smart, can play savvy, veteran guy, almost 40 years old, mind you, but can still get it done in the NBA and not turn the ball over. That is Chris Paul. That's Mike Dunleavy's job there. Going and getting Podziemski and Trace Jackson Davis. In a way, albeit I don't think it was the plan for the long view, they did in a way set themselves up for a short stint without Stephen Curry.
Speaking of Stephen Curry, when we come back here on 95.7 The Game and Warriors this week, we want to detail the injury. Our man, Sterling Bennett, will update you on what's happened and when you can expect him back. And also, let's talk about the ankle injury going forward and how it's plagued this young man throughout his entire career and going back in the day when it didn't look like this career would ever get off the ground. We'll talk Steph Curry. We'll talk about the Warriors without their stars. They take on the San Antonio Spurs beginning tonight in the home and home. Tonight is out at Chase. Sterling Bennett, Dan Avone, producer Ken, back with much more on Warriors this week after this quick timeout.
Are you curious about who offers the best deals on top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs? The answer is surprising. It's not online, and it's not.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Warriors This Week, Dan Avone and Sterling Bennett. My man, the producer, Kenny from Queens.
What'd you call him last week? Not Ken.
He introduced himself as James, and so I rolled with it.
Not true.
Kenny, of course, rocking the New York Mets. Kenny from Queens, rocking what else? The New York Mets. How your Mets going to be this year, man? Come on, just and be within reason.
I mean, they have a chance. We'll see how far it goes. It's all about staying healthy. It's the most generic answer, but who knows with this team? Because it could all fall apart by May. We have no idea. We already got our Cy Young pitcher who was voted for a Cy Young last year. Senga is out. He's going to be out till probably June, so we don't know.
So it's over.
Pretty much. Season's over.
I'll tell you what, though, and I was talking to Kenny from Queens about this before the show.
You mean James, right? James?
No. Are you okay with Kenny from Queens? I don't know where that came from. But he's actually from Jersey.
Yes, sir.
My old man's from Jersey, so we got a connection there.
Nice.
Oofa, Jersey. Hey.
Where in Jersey, real quick?
Well, outside of Montclair, but my old man grew up down neck from Newark, New Jersey, so he's
right across the the bay there.
He was
Bayonne, so yeah.
Yeah, Bayonne, exactly. Wow. So, but as you get older, you make a little money, you get the hell out of Newark. I think was the sort of the story. But their owner spends money, man. That's all you want is someone like Cohen just to dude,
He will give that fan base whatever they want.
Yeah, and so is Joe Lacob. How's that for the segue of the week, ladies and gentlemen?
What a segue.
We're talking about Steph Curry and the latest ankle injury. Before we get any further, why don't you just update people who are just tuning in to the latest concerning Steph Curry and the bad wheel?
Yes, Steph Curry suffered an ankle injury, had an MRI yesterday, according to Shams and Woj. He's only expected to miss, hopefully, 1 to 4 games. 5 is pushing it, maybe a week and a half of time, but it's not a serious injury. The MRI came back clean. Steph Curry not going to play tonight against the San Antonio Spurs, questionable for Monday against San Antonio, what I would like to assume, my own thoughts, Wednesday and next Saturday, much more attainable for Curry.
Now, obviously, this is nothing new to Steph Curry and certainly Dub Nation when you're talking about the ankle injuries.
Like the first 6 years of his career.
Remember that?
Ankle injuries.
I just looked this up. He missed the first game of his professional career with the Golden State Warriors due to a left ankle sprain, then underwent ankle surgery after being sidelined for 8 games throughout the year. At one point in his second season, Curry sprained his ankle twice in 7 days, and this was just sort of the ongoing issue with him in a career that a lot of people felt as though he was the next Bill Walton, that it was going to be one of those careers that never got off the ground. It was going to be one of those what could have been.
Well, there were talks of trade Curry, not Monte, because Curry can never stay healthy.
And, of course, as a result, he signed that contract, which was highway robbery. But the one, I was reading, I think it was Brian Windhorst who wrote this. Did you know
that guy?
Really?
Yeah.
Windy?
Yeah, I can't stand him.
What's wrong with Brian Windhorst?
So if you have followed his career, he just follows LeBron everywhere he goes. He was in Cleveland. He was in Miami. Now he's in LA. That guy, if you talk about riding the coattails of one of the greatest superstars ever, Brian Windhorst is public enemy number 1 in that category. He is LeBron James's personal journalist. It's insane.
But he's good, though. He has good insight.
I'm not saying his work isn't good. I'm just saying, talk about you want to follow a star wherever he goes. He has followed LeBron James everywhere.
Oh, interesting. But Windhorst was talking about when Steph Curry puts on his sneaker, he has a moon boot that he plays every single game on both feet because of the injuries early on in his career to the ankles.
What's a moon boot?
It's this sort of...
Because I think of moon shoes where you jump and they kick you up like those old 90s kids toys.
Yeah, so it's this... I guess it's this wrap. It's almost sort of a much smaller version of a support that's almost a shoe that sort of goes up the ankle, so therefore it's considered a boot.
Okay.
And he has to slide that on, and so he has custom-made shoes.
I see him.
They're custom-made shoes so that they can fit around this apparatus or this boot, if you will. It's almost similar to you're a football guy. You know how offensive linemen wear knee braces?
Yeah.
Just as a protective measure, whether they have knee injuries or not, just to, because guys are always falling into them.
Precaution.
So just a reminder of how this guy's career, where it started, and how it continues to rear its ugly head. Just the other night, where he twists that ankle, and
it looked really bad.
It looked bad, but could that be attributed to, again, he's playing too many minutes, that he's playing too much, that if you don't have fresh legs, are you susceptible to an injury like that?
He didn't play half the Boston game.
True, but
and
when
he blew out Milwaukee.
But when you just think about the load that this guy, where he hasn't had
in totality, on pace for 79 games, like
exactly, he hasn't played 70 more games going back to the 2017 season. So the amount of minutes on a guy, again, it's not Jokic, it's not Embiid. You're talking about a dude who relies on his wheels, right?
Yeah.
Like every time he shoots a three, he's sidestepping, he's crossing over, he's using his handle, he gets to the rim. Like there's a lot of wear and tear.
How many scratches and bruises do you see him after a game? And you're like, how is this guy not getting calls? So again, to your point, he's kind of a smaller guy. He's a point guard. And he's going up against bigger bodied forwards and centers and running through them every single night.
And I think the bigger point in all of this becomes that he's now getting an inadvertent, once again, couple of days off, couple of games off, maybe a week, potentially maybe 10 days. And that is a good thing for Warrior fans. Although typically, because again, you could set your watch to this, that Steph Curry suffering an injury is something that has happened over the last 5 years. I remember he broke the wrist.
Yeah, yep.
He had, I believe, a hip injury when he fell out.
Was it Memphis? When he fell and hit his hip on that weird
was that
hump?
Houston or Memphis? Yeah, one of those.
It was a weird, shouldn't have happened injury.
And so, again, every single year he's missing time, but towards the end of the campaign, he's had those fresh legs. Well, we're getting towards the end of the campaign, and the injury is sort of untimely this year in that it's so late in the campaign, so you'd like to get him back. I just wanted to go here for a second because this just made news the other day. That when you think about guys like Steph Curry, who certainly got paid and is getting paid and deserves every single penny, if not more, in terms of his brand and merchandising and what does he mean for a franchise like that of the Golden State Warriors. I think you can't even quantify how much money this guy means to a team.
Yeah.
But this guy, much like that of the Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, who had that incredible block that we were talking about, that he was in and out of that game because of an ankle injury. Guys that just play through pain and recognize that, pain is part of it. You got to play through it. Where am I going with this? Well, guess who got shut down this year and will not be coming back to the Brooklyn Nets?
Ben Simmons.
Ben Simmons will be unavailable to the Brooklyn Nets this year. And I just say that to, once again, highlight the fact that there are some guys, and Ben Simmons is almost a blessing because it helps us recognize every now and then there's a Jamarcus Russell, there's a Ryan Leaf, there's a Ben Simmons, although he's not necessarily a bust because he did have big years in Philadelphia. But it just reminds us.
Could you imagine had Golden State actually acquired him? That was a conversation for a lot of time.
Thank you.
Like
how many calls did we take back in the day?
You got to get Ben Simmons, man. You have to acquire Simmons. He will carry this team into the future. Yikes.
That and Bradley Beal. Trade half the team for Bradley Beal. But it just goes to show you that there are some that just don't want to play and would rather get paid.
Yeah.
And then there are the Steph Currys of the world. And I say Anthony Edwards because I happen to be watching that game where he went out like, oh my God, this dude is done for a while. And then he came back limping onto the floor and then had that remarkable block. There are some guys that they play basketball or sports at that very fundamental level. Just like you and I, when we were playing down in the schoolyard, when you're kids, you just want to beat the hell out of the guy guarding you or you just want to win. Like it feeds a competitive nature. Yes, the money's great, but it's all sort of.
That's not the reason why you play.
No.
It's a reason, but the reason why you get into sports is because you're a competitor. And I want to beat you, Dan. You want to beat me. Ben Simmons don't want to beat nobody. Nobody. Steph Curry wants to win championships. Ben Simmons wants to cash checks. And that's fine. You can be that way if you're the 10th guy off the bench, you're Juwan Howard getting carried by the Heat and LeBron James. That's fine. Not when you're a star player getting paid $50 million a year.
Oh, he's a crime, man. He's an absolute crime. But
just imagine him in Golden State, man. Talk about one of the worst moves Bob Myers could have made. Forget Wiseman. Like Ben Simmons would have been that move.
Just to digress for a moment, because we were talking about this at the break. Speaking of trades and worst trades ever, Is the Russell Wilson trade the worst ever in the NFL?
Man, I mean, so what? He got 2 years there. They finished in last place his first season there. And then last season, got benched. They want to pay him or play him anymore. That might be. And think Drew Lock, a throwaway quarterback in that trade for Seattle, helped them beat Philadelphia late last year and helped San Francisco in return. That trade was more of a win for the Niners than it was for either team involved in that trade. That's crazy to think about.
So the Seahawks got 4 picks, I want to say.
I think so. They got Noah Fant. They got Drew Lock.
Yeah.
And someone else in the trade. I forgot who it was.
Look it up.
But
so they got Drew Lock, Noah Fant, the tight end, and 2 first-round draft picks, 2 second-round picks, and 1 fifth-round pick for one Russell Wilson, who clearly you could see that the wheels were coming off in Seattle. All right, what the hell are we talking about here? All right. Getting back to our man, Steph Curry, and the Golden State Warriors. Just our original question right off the top, 888-957-9570, 888-957-9570. We get back into Warriors talk. With him down with yet another ankle injury as the Moon Boot and company will take a rest, who is it for the Golden State Warriors that steps up now and takes on the brunt or the scoring load, and or is it more of a collective where you're having multiple players now in double digits? My man, Sterling Bennett believes that it's going to be, or it should be, one Jonathan Kuminga, that he's primed now to be that guy that is going to give you the 25 points that are potentially missing, and that he can step into that number 1 spot. The one thing about Jonathan Kuminga that I've sort of recognized throughout this breakout is that he seems to be more of an opportunistic player. And what I mean by that is that, he likes to rip and run. If there's a rebound, he'll get out and fill a lane, tip dunks. He'll take someone off the bounce if he feels like he's got an advantage. But when they're designed plays for him, I don't know if he's as effective. And maybe that goes towards being that number 1, because they call a lot of plays for him now where they're just like, okay, you've earned this.
Yeah.
We're essentially just clearing a side for you, and you're going mano a mano. And I don't know if that's the best version of Jonathan Kuminga.
So what you're saying is he'd rather play freely unstructured compared to, okay, design play, get in the paint, body someone down, post him up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, he's still good at it, and he can still recognize when he has an advantage, and he can go right at guys. But I think it's more effective with him when it's within the flow of the offense, where it's not just, okay, it's Jonathan Kuminga, either double him or he's going to go right at the rim and get fouled and or score the bucket in the best case scenario for the Warriors.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree that Kuminga doesn't want to be utilized in a structured offense. I mean, he's amazing on back screens for the Golden State Warriors. He's awesome. I feel like he scores on every single one of them, like in the YouTube chat brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union, George Hart points out. I mean, Kuminga is excellent on back screens for Golden State. But I also think that having Chris Paul now take Stephen Curry's spot, you're going to see that even more. You're going to see no longer is Curry, in this case now Chris Paul, making 15, 20 shots a game. You're going to have him facilitating, letting Kuminga feed more on back screens, giving the ball to Clay, giving the ball to Moses Moody and others. Like this, in the absence of Stephen Curry, yes, I do think Kuminga is the most capable player on this roster to carry the load offensively when it comes to simply points. Not talking about creating his own shot. Not talking about, just dominating games. I just think getting points on the board, that to me leans to Kuminga because what he's able to do in the paint. Like we've seen him. He's 21 years old. He's one of the most explosive players in the NBA at his peak, where he's dunking. Kevin Dana on the call against Toronto, I don't know if you heard it, he goes, he just murdered Jakob Poeltl, R.I.P. Like what Kuminga's able to do to guys bigger than him that are in the paint, just other guys cannot do on this offense. Hence why I lean towards Kuminga being that guy in the absence of Curry.
He'll get his opportunity. And again, I think with Steph down, this is the one benefit of having what I think is a good problem and that is being deep. Now, listen, you can't.
Are you saying strength in numbers?
Well, I didn't want to go there, but you don't want to lose because there's no replacing Steph Curry. I get it, but now that it's almost sometimes when you have the absence of certain players, you don't want GP2 down, you don't want Chris Paul to go down, you don't want Andrew Wiggins out. But sometimes when those guys were out, when Andrew Wiggins was out for an extended period of time, again for personal reasons, it almost feels as though there's sort of a weight that's been lifted off the shoulders of Steve Kerr. It's like, okay, my biggest challenge every night is how am I going to work in 11 dudes? How am I going to make all of these guys? How am I going to make sure that I appease everybody that they get enough run? When somebody's now out of the lineup, it makes my job a lot easier. And I think with Steph gone, that the Warriors, because of their depth now, can do it in such a variety of ways. If this means now that obviously, again, it's different positions, but you get an opportunity to see more of Trayce Jackson-Davis. Podziemski maybe gets a little bit more run. Moses Moody now becomes much more prominent. This is an opportunity, I think, for everybody to sort of contribute. And now because you have the depth, whereas a year ago, if Steph goes down, if Wiggins goes down, if Chris Paul and GP2 go down, it's pretty much hold your breath because what the hell are we going to do? Really?
You got DiVincenzo and you got Jordan Poole.
Well, DiVincenzo was the one bright spot. I'm talking about Ty Jerome and the Anthony Lambs and the JaMychal Greens
Brad Wanamakers in previous years.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nightmare the last couple of years in terms of the bench.
Yeah.
So because of the depth, and I know it's an issue of trying to play 12 guys.
Yeah.
It's difficult to
you just can't do it every night.
No, but I think that when you see someone go down with an injury like that of Steph Curry, trying to stay away from strength and numbers, but that's really clearly who they've become because of the depth that they have this year.
For the Warriors, like just take tonight, for example, against San Antonio. Not a good team. What, they won 13 games all year. Like they simply stink and they're not going to have their star. This is a game where Kerr can almost tweak with things, make the adjustments on the fly and kind of see how a Steph Curry, less or in the absence of Curry offense structure works for Golden State. Like this is arguably the perfect game to not have Steph in as you build towards the future without him for the next week and a half or so. You can try things tonight and probably still win. Like this is a game where, yes, you have to win. You can't lose against San Antonio, especially tonight with Nwembi on the court. But this is a game where they can go into it with a game plan. If it doesn't work, they can put other guys in, fix rotations how they want to, and actually work with the rotation as the game is progressing and make those changes where they see fit. Like, could Golden State come out there and just rock San Antonio and beat them by 30? Yeah. They don't have Wemby. Like, they don't have a guy that actually can offset your strengths and can expose your weaknesses like Wembanyama can. Whereas Golden State now has, without Curry, still has 9, 10 guys that can actually, get you 5, 10 points a night and be impactful. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we do see Kevon Looney in there a little bit, or a Saric of, hey, like with Chris Paul back on the court, do we see a return of Saric back with him? Not as a starter, obviously, but let's try to get him kind of back up to speed and get him back involved in the offense. Saric can play meaningful minutes for this team. Now I get you have Trayce Jackson-Davis, who was questionable tonight, mind you, also rolled his ankle against Chicago. What if TJD can't play? Is Saric back out there? Is it Kevon Looney back out there? Like, I do think there is a chance for Golden State to kind of fine-tune, tweak some things that maybe haven't worked in the past week or so and kind of get back to that, where if Steph was out there, you rocking with the same 9-8 guys doing what you had, and that's worked, mind you, for the past month or so. I do think without Steph, they can actually rekindle some magic with Saric, with Looney again.
I'm like one of those, and I think that one of our earlier callers, Austin, who relishes opportunities like this. With Steph out, you don't want to see it. Maybe relish isn't the right word, but there's an opportunity there to look at this through a different lens, and that is, okay, now it's a chance for some players to prove themselves. Yeah. I kind of like once in a while when you get into those road trips and you go back to back. Now, they haven't been able to do it of late simply because every game is so paramount now, but when they would rest Draymond Green and Clay and Steph, it was on the back-to-back, just load management and sit them out of a back-to-back on the road. I sort of enjoy those games because it gets an opportunity for all these young players that you sometimes you're curious about how would they do with more minutes, and just getting an opportunity to see them thrown into the fire sometimes it's enjoyable. And I think that this is going to be not to that extent but it's another opportunity to see some young players who have a lot of promise now in a very important part of the season come center stage, and it's sort of sink or swim. And I think because they have so many moving pieces, it's really intriguing for the Golden State Warriors to play without Steph Curry and see if they can stay afloat. And I think the game that'll determine that, again, will coming up on Wednesday when they take on Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks. Just getting back to Trayce Jackson-Davis and the Golden State Warriors. You know, part of the reason, like when I was saying Trayce Jackson-Davis needs to play more, I would see it on the text line. I get calls and people would push back. Listen, they're two different players. You need Dario Saric to stretch the floor, which he does. He spaces the floor. I get that because he's a shooter. And by the way, you cannot point at Steve Kerr and saying you did Dario Saric wrong. Like Dario shot his ass out of that rotation. He's been really bad. He hasn't been able to shoot well. But like there's different ways to carve up that pig. And it doesn't always have to be on the perimeter and shooting and ball movement. That's the way the Warriors have done it, and they move without the ball better than anybody, and it's still the ingredient to their success. But to go pick and roll, which is something that they traditionally don't do, and now they're warming to it with Trayce Jackson-Davis, is also an effective way to score the basketball. And you're beginning to see it now. And now Chris Paul is like, because he was sort of the outlier, right? He comes to the Golden State Warriors, and the big question for him and everybody else is, well, how are you going to fit into this team?
Right.
It's not a half-court walk it up. We want to get out and run. You know, we shoot the three. What the hell is it that you're going to do? You're completely dissimilar to what it is that this team does. It's like the old Sesame Street. Which one of these doesn't fit with the others? Well, it's Chris Paul. And now you're seeing Chris Paul with the emergence of Trayce Jackson-Davis get right back to his bread and butter.
Yeah.
And to see Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. Like the pick and roll, again, is still the most unstoppable and effective play in basketball. And to have Trayce Jackson-Davis, a young player with good hands, who's good around the rim, like to see more of that is not a bad thing for the Golden State Warriors. We don't always have to shoot it from beyond. You don't always have to space the floor, and you don't always have to address the three-point line. You can get back to basketball that was played back in the 1970s from time to time and go pick and roll and still carve people up.
Well, and tonight when there is no Wembanyama, there is no 7-foot monster in the paint. Like, you can penetrate the paint tonight. You're going to have Charles Bassey out there for San Antonio, Dominic Barlow, and Julian, what is it, Gray and Sochan out there. Like, those are no ones. And I'm not being disrespectful. I can guarantee you ask 99% of the country and NBA fans, name one player on the Spurs, not named Wembanyama. They couldn't do it. I think for Golden State tonight is it's not a prove it game or whatever, or a statement game, but it is hey, let's go out there, do the pick and roll, play our brand of basketball without Stephen Curry, and find out who we are without him. Like, and you can go back early in the year, even in past seasons. It took them a little bit to find out who they were without Steph, but they had Jordan Poole that can play just enough like Steph that there was that semblance of what it kind of used to be when he's on the field. Now you don't have that Jordan Poole that wants to be Steph Curry kind of player. You don't have Steph on the court. You may have to go to pick and roll, which guess what? Kevon, Trayce Jackson-Davis, if he plays, Kuminga, and others are going to benefit from a player like Chris Paul.
The text line, the Comcast business text line, tonight is the game Trayce Jackson-Davis will go off and dunk and sky hook all over the Spurs. I have yet to see him shoot a sky hook. Am I missing something here? When the hell has he shot a sky hook? All right, maybe it's in the bag and we'll see it tonight. Mitch in New Jersey, rest of the callers, hang in there. We got to pay some bills, get to a break. We'll continue with Warriors this week when we return after this.
Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
1 hour to go. I want to get into a look at the standings and if play that game if the season were to end today, who the Golden State Warriors would face in that first round. Take a look at potentially the play-in matchups. Do they still have a shot at the 6th seed? Can they get to the Phoenix Suns or the New Orleans Pelicans? I don't see why not. I'm only talking about 3.5 games, which is a lot with 19 to go.
It's a lot tougher to come back in the NBA than the MLB or the NFL.
True. And you're also looking to leapfrog a lot of teams. So It's not just 3.5. It's 3.5 games that you have to make up, but also leapfrogging the Kings, the Mavericks, the Lakers. So there's a challenge there, but certainly doable. But I do want to play the game, the Lakers in the play-in, or excuse me, the Warriors in the play-in game, which would, they would have to take on the Lakers if the season were to end today, and just take a look at some of those scenarios. But before we do that, let's get out to the phone lines once again. 888-957-9570. Mitch is hanging out in New Jersey. Mitch, what's going on, my man?
How you guys doing?
Mitch, hold on, Mitch. Before we go anywhere, where in Jersey are you exactly?
Oh, you were talking about, I'm in East Windsor. And I'm from Staten Island.
That's right. Now, what do you know about Bayonne?
Bayonne Bridge.
Yeah, talk about Bayonne. What do you think about?
Bayonne's nice.
What do you think about the people from Bayonne? Are they all right?
They're cool. They're good.
They're on the other side of the bridge. You never can trust the other side of the bridge sometimes. All right, go ahead, Mitch.
Oh, really? I know. I'm from the good side of Staten Island. Right by the college center. Hey, unfortunately with Curry with injury, but you're kind of deep at backcourt. I mean, you got 2 Hall of Famers sitting on the bench. I mean, they're getting the share minutes. But I'm glad to see, and it wasn't the right way, but I'm glad to see Moody get more time. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it, Mitch. Where is he? He's from Windsor or something. I don't know. Where the hell is he from?
He's from Staten Island, but he lives in East Windsor. So, that's like South Jersey. Like, my mother lives down near that area.
Staten Island's a lot of cops and firemen.
Good pizza.
I've been to the East Coast once my entire life.
Yeah, why is that?
I was in 8th grade for a field trip, going to Philadelphia, going to Jersey, New York. My best friend, he went up to one of the Elmo impersonator actors there in the whole costume, kicked him, and the guy was like, "Hey, we're gonna throw hands now." So my only time on the East Coast, we got threatened by Elmo of all people.
You got to be careful, man.
What's going on? I'm
they're
14.
regular people. You got to be careful.
Saw the naked cowboy out there playing his guitar. It's a good time.
I was talking to a buddy recently who grew up in New York. And he was talking about the rivalries, and he's one of those San Francisco's just like New York. There's nothing like, New York and Boston.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, and he's an older guy that I swim with, and he's like, I had a roommate in New York that would go to Knicks games, Yankee games, just to get into a fight. Like he said, he would give me bail money before he left the house.
Oh, my goodness.
That's the way that some of those people are wired.
He's prepared, though. Hey. Just in case.
I made this statement last week that, listen, Andrew Wiggins, I get it. Personal reasons, we have no idea what it is that he's dealing with. And as the media, as well as Coach Kerr and company, you have to handle it with sort of kid gloves because you just don't know. I'm just telling you from a fan standpoint, Andrew Wiggins, be thankful you ain't playing in New York or Philadelphia or Boston because they sure as hell are going after you. And
I don't think he would have made it through last season.
True.
He would have been booed out of the building.
I mean, Andrew Wiggins is one of those guys that, again, we have touched on this. He's in that sweet spot. Mm-hmm. The Warriors are sort of feast or famine. They're either too old or they're too young. And you got one guy who's sort of in that 28, 29. He's 29 years of age. That should be balling. But because of the inconsistency and the frustration that is Andrew Wiggins, you get glimpses from time to time. And then he just sort of disappears.
Do you think he's here next year? I know it's a long ways away, but
well, you have that's a good question because you have the contract, obviously,
right?
But he now becomes this coincides right with the emergence of some of these younger players.
Yep.
Does he become expendable? Are you ready to commit to Moses Moody? Where are you? Or commit that? But who's going to play then the other forward spot?
You can go sign somebody else if you need to, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because
what about TJD playing the 5 or the 4?
Yeah, that's a good.
He's playing
so
well.
Your front line would be TJD, Draymond, and Kuminga.
And that's if you don't have a bench. There's a whole offseason that will eventually come and go where they can change the roster around, but Chris Paul's going to be gone. They're going to be players if they want to move a contract outside of Chris Paul. They can go sign a big name if they wanted to.
I think the question then becomes, just to play with it for a second, if my front court is Trace Jackson Davis, are we putting him at the 5? Putting him at the 4?
Probably.
So if you've got Trace Jackson Davis at a forward, Draymond's the center. Yeah, I think Draymond is just suited for that center position. And then you got Kuminga at the other forward spot. Defensively, can Trace Jackson Davis get out? And can he? I know
Maybe
he's
not.
a good defender, but that would be my concern.
And again,
when teams go small,
right?
Which
this team likes to do. But you are right. Yes, and he's only going to be in year 2. It's hard to play a year 2 player as a starter. Hard to play a year 2 player in general at times.
It's certainly worth thinking about. He's year 2, but he's going to be 25 years of age next year.
Well, that's like him and Pajemski, right? They're both 3-4 year starters in college, and Moody a 4-year starter at Arkansas.
Yeah.
These guys know how to play. Kind of like Brock Purdy.
Well, no, Moody was 1 year.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. He came into the league at age 19. Yeah. Okay. And I think it was part of the reason, after taking 2 teenagers in Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, it was, I think there was a level of intent behind the drafting of a guy who had been at 4 years at Indiana.
Draft-ready players.
Yeah, I think that they recognize that there's so many hurdles, and that these players having the quote-unquote potential tag was not an area that they wanted to continue to go down. And that's the reason why Trace Jackson Davis was somebody that sort of filled out what it is that they were looking for. And also under a coach in Mike Woodson, who not only had experience as a player at the NBA level, but was a coach at the NBA level. So you have that guy.
He definitely unlocked Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah, and so he was the perfect fit, I think, when you think about their recent draft history and going with teenagers in Moses Moody, a teenager in Jonathan Kuminga, and then pulling the trigger. Pajemski he wasn't a 4-year player at Santa Clara in Illinois, but still a guy that I think we'd all agree is sort of one of those old souls. He may as well have been somebody who played 5 years, right? Because he's just that guy who gets it.
It's like Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's young, a really young player.
Oh God, we're not working Brock.
No,
Purdy.
I'm not. I'm just saying, he came in with 4 years under his belt, experience, had seen all these systems, all these plays, all these defenses, and came in saying, this does not, I don't feel like a fish out of water in the NFL. Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis, although at times look like that, the vast majority of their play, they look like they fit in the NBA.
Agreed. All right, so the Golden State Warriors currently sitting at the number 10 seed. They're a half game behind the Lakers. They are a game and a half behind the Mavericks. Once again, those two teams still have 3 games left between each other. A lot to be said between now and the end of the year when you're talking about the Dallas Mavericks and the Golden State Warriors. They'll play the first of those 3 games coming up on Wednesday, and they'll do that at Dallas. But the Golden State Warriors, if they go in as a 10 seed, all right, let's just say that, the Lakers stay ahead of them and they got to play the Lakers in that play-in game. What chances do you give them? Not only getting out of the play-in series, but a team that potentially could get back to the Western Conference Finals?
Ooh.
Can they get, well, let's just start with the Lakers. Can they beat the Lakers in the play-in
Well, they play them 2 more times. They play them this Sunday, then April 9th. So a tiebreaker could be up for grabs. That game could be at Chase Center, or that game could be at Crypto. It depends on where that game is, I think. But I do think the Lakers, with the bigger body players they have, LeBron, AD, it's going to give this smaller Golden State Warriors team some issues. Although I would like to see Golden State knock out LA after what happened last year, I have a hard time buying into the idea that LeBron and AD would not dominate the backcourt of Golden State.
And LeBron James, who became the first NBA player this past week to score 40,000 points, and he still got it going. And a guy that he's dealing with a bad ankle of his own.
Guy's got to be healthy, mind you.
Yes.
We're working under the idea Curry's back, LeBron's back, AD's healthy.
Every time I hear LeBron James, and again, this came up this past week, and I heard this, that he cannot wait to play with his son, Bronny.
Bronny, yeah.
That ain't happening next year.
No.
Has anybody seen Bronny James play basketball at USC?
Well, it went from, he's a borderline first round pick to he may not get drafted.
No, you cannot draft him. I don't care if it means LeBron James is coming to join my team and I'm whomever. If I'm Charlotte.
You wouldn't take a second round flyer on Bronny to get LeBron?
No.
Really?
Not a second round. No, the guy's not even
LaMelo, Bronny, LeBron.
He is not worthy of getting drafted right now. He has to go into the league as a free agent.
What if your team like the Knicks though? And I'm sure Ken back there will love this. You got Randall, right? Go out and get LeBron. You have Bronny. Put some other things together. I think Brunson's there. Like LeBron has always had an eye towards New York. I know he went to Miami, then LA, but he's always had an eye, a favor. The Big Apple might appease me. If I'm a team like New York that wants that star. You got Randall, you get LeBron, you got Brunson, you got Bronny James. Like, if that could entice LeBron to New York, I think they would take a second round flyer on him.
If I knew that his wagon was hitched to Bronny, and it's a package deal.
Do you think it is, though?
And I'm who's the lunatic that Dolan. And I'm
Leon Rose kind of runs things, really. Dolan kind of just sits on the side.
He's
Thankfully, we just got, real quick, we just got on the right track in the last couple years.
Well,
this would just recreate another circus. Sterling, please don't put
you'll
that
watch every night, though.
Of course I would. But, I mean, what good would it do? I don't want to see
Wins and losses don't matter if you have LeBron in New York. It's the money.
Yeah, no, you know what? Kenny from Queens brings up a good point. I think that they have waited forever to get to this point. Yeah. And now that they're, with the Josh Harts of the world, the Robinsons, and, you've got Brunson and you got Randall. That's a younger, we talked about the sweet spot. Like they're in a good sweet spot. They're in that good 25 to 28-year-old.
They got
sort of like
the Villanova boys out there doing it together again. Yeah.
Yeah. And DiVincenzo.
Yeah.
DiVincenzo.
Big ragu.
You love DiVincenzo.
Well, DiVincenzo in New York. I mean, like,
makes sense.
DiVincenzo, we're gonna go see DiVincenzo at the Garden tonight. Like, come on, man, where else should he be playing?
That's funny.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I knew for 1 year that I got LeBron James, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like,
because I sure as hell am not drafting Bronny hoping he's coming.
Interesting.
Because Bronny's.
I would not draft him. I'm just saying.
Here's the thing. To really, in all honesty, just to look at this objectively, Bronny James might have a shot at the NBA because there's a lot of kids as freshmen that aren't very good. He's not bad. He just he does a lot of things, but nothing stands out. So next year, he probably gets an opportunity to start and then plays better and things are slowing down for him. And then maybe in year 3, he can become more of a prominent player in the, Big 12.
What's more likely?
And then maybe 3 years from now, he goes into the NBA draft.
So 4-year player at USC, right? That's what you're saying.
Or 3 years.
Okay, so does LeBron have 3 more years under him? Okay, so that's what you're getting at, really.
Exactly.
Is that LeBron's not playing 3 more years to wait for Bronny. Okay.
He's going to come out this year, and LeBron James is going. And LeBron James is already talking about, although he sort of had to temper things, how his son is better than anybody in the locker room right now, and was taking a shot at the Los Angeles Lakers and talking about how he's game ready, and why he had to delete a tweet this past week when he said, "Hey, everybody lay off for Bronny James. Like he's just a kid. Like, come on, man, you can't
hype him up
exactly
and then take it back." What did you make of the Golden State Warriors?
You know why Bronny became relevant?
Why?
Is because ESPN took him off their draft board.
Okay.
So, their draft board, he was no longer, so now they even have projected him as a guy that's not getting drafted. And that's when LeBron James chimed in and said, hey, listen, man, he's 19 years old or 18.
Talk to his boy Windhorst. He works there. Put him back on. What did you make of the Golden State Warriors kind of tiptoeing around the idea of calling LA, saying, hey, what does LeBron feel about coming up to Golden State?
Yeah, that I don't understand. Is that Draymond Green?
Who knows? Is that just them trying to toy with, hey, we might need somebody else?
Well, okay, so what I need to know is who it is that you're giving, because I'm surprised. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I'm surprised on some teams, and again, the Warriors, because they've cultivated the proper culture, and it starts at the top and with Steve Kerr. These guys are level-headed people. That you don't have that turbulent sort of back and forth and cancer in the locker room that you see with other teams. That never pertains to the Golden State Warriors. But just think about
instances of that.
Yeah, but it's been sort of mild that you can deal with. It's not to the point where it's like
it may have detoured their entire.
You're talking about last year.
I mean, saying there have been instances with one certain player that may have made some problems in the locker room. Yes.
But I'm talking about nothing that obvious. Obviously, I'm just talking about the back talking and the bad vibes.
Right.
Like you don't see a lot of that with the Warriors. But there was a recipe. If it was Draymond Green, it had to be Draymond that initiated that. All right, because LeBron James, they all belong to the same.
Clutch Sports.
They belong to Clutch Sports. They're all tight. They all hang out. And for him to come and play with the Golden State Warriors, you know that the Los Angeles Lakers, all right, well, give me Jonathan Kuminga, give me draft picks, and give me Moody or whomever.
Right.
So now that we know that LeBron James was able to save face and saying, no, I'm not interested, I'm just curious, like it could have been a lot uglier when you had Draymond Green going back to the locker room after the All-Star break and Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and everybody else knowing, dude, did you just try and ship me off? Like,
well, that's how it was with LeBron when they had Lonzo and Ingram and Randall. Like, hey, like you're supposed to be the timepiece to make us better. Now we're out there playing in New Orleans. Josh Hart was also there. Like they brought him to the Lakers to be the star around their young core, the 4 players they had. And then within 5 months, he was like, get him out of here.
Yeah.
Like the last thing you want is Draymond. And now I look at that more as Clutch working their magic, saying, oh, LeBron wants to play with Steph and trying to make the Lakers look bad to make LeBron look better. That's how I view that.
How do you think the Lakers, had they not listened to LeBron James, the GM? Now, they won that one title in the bubble, which I put a huge asterisk next to. But think about the Los Angeles Lakers. Had he never come to town, and you just think about the Lakers and their starting lineup, they didn't move everybody. You got D. Russ, you got Lonzo Ball, you got Julius Randle, you got Brandon Ingram, and you got Josh Hart. That's your starting 5.
But there also is something to say that maybe it took those guys leaving and going elsewhere to become who they are today. Like maybe it took getting traded to New York for Randle to become an all-star forward. Maybe it took going to New Orleans for Ingram to kind of bud into a star, and Lonzo's been hurt for 2 years.
No, that's true. Lonzo...
with my Chicago Bulls of all people, like, man.
And we're leaving out KCP, who was also part of that team.
Ankle monitor KCP?
Listen, KCP is one of those guys that is quietly a good defender.
He's on Denver now, right?
He's on Denver. He locks up Steph Curry. Steph Curry does not like playing against this guy. So he might be the Steph stopper. Remember the Kobe stopper back in the day? Ruben Patterson? So the Golden State Warriors, if the season were to end today, got the Los Angeles Lakers in that play-in game. And again, I said this early on in the show, that it's important in all teams, the Warriors, the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Kings, the Suns, and the Pelicans, you can all throw into that mix, want to avoid the play-in game. Like it's something you want nothing to do with, so you want to get into that 6th seed. But I would say it's more important for the Golden State Warriors than any of the other teams that I just mentioned.
Over LA?
Well, the Lakers are an older team too, but
they're kind of in the same group to me.
Well, aside from LeBron, who else is old?
Anthony Davis is always injured.
Yeah, he could use the time off, but he's still in his late 20s.
Their stars need it more than the entire roster might.
Yeah. I would. Yeah, I guess the Lakers and the Warriors are sort of, I would say the Warriors more so because there's 3 guys
compared to 2
that need
and you can even toss in Chris Paul in there too, maybe. He's an older guy. He's almost 40.
You know, and when I watch the Warriors, so getting that, that 6th seed gives you that week off. When I watch the Warriors play, if I was the coach of the Golden State Warriors, I would just make sure that I didn't have Steph, Draymond, Clay, and Chris Paul on the floor at the same time. That's just, aside from the fact that all those guys are future Hall of Famers and they're all remarkable players, but it's just too old. Yeah. It's just too old. Like you can't, the reason why the Warriors are so good with youth is look at Podziemski run. How many times is Podziemski just, not even with the ball in his hand, just beating everybody up the floor, just filling a lane. Same thing with Trace Jackson Davis. Like, throw it to me. If it was a sprint, they're always beating everyone up the floor. Like, that energy
the effort's
is
always there.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that if you are the Warriors and you are a game and a half behind LA, like, when I look at who they have to jump to get to the 6th seed, I have a hard time believing that they're going to make it there. Like, they don't play the Suns again. They don't play the Kings again. So you have the Mavericks and Lakers a total of 5 more times. 2 of them, this week if Stephen Curry does not play. That leaves 3 games where you may or may not have Steph, depending on how long he's out, where you get to play the Mavericks and Lakers. You're almost putting your hope in other teams' hands, and the Warriors themselves, despite me thinking they could win 3 or 4 without Steph, have been one of the most inconsistent teams this year. Like, there is no guarantee the Warriors win, 14 more games to end the year. They can be in all those games. There's no guarantee. And if Steph's out for a week and a half, just as you can win 3 or 4, 3 or 5, you can also be 1-4, 0-5. Like, that's just the way the NBA goes. Any given night, even a bad team like San Antonio, if they get Wemby back on Monday, they could beat you. And you're sitting back saying, oh my goodness, we're in dangerous territory here. Now we're 2.5 from LA. Now we're 3.5 behind Dallas. We can't catch these guys. Like, this week is very pivotal to what Golden State needs to get done for the remainder of the season, which is why I think that starts tonight. Because if you lose tonight, and maybe even on Monday, or split those 2 games, you're sitting back saying, our trek up the path gets a lot harder, and it might be almost nearly impossible for the Warriors.
Well, the one thing that you can hang your hat on is that the Golden State Warriors will be in the playing game as the 10 seed.
Correct. They're not falling to 11.
They're not falling to 11. But at that 10 seed, I would almost say, look, it's either get to the 6 or, playing in the postseason is going to be beneficial for the young players regardless. Yeah. And if that's what we're doing here, just seasoning them so that they're better prepared going forward next year and the years to come, well then, yeah, go ahead, get in a playing game or 2. But there's no way in hell that you're making a run at the Western Conference Finals. No. That's just not happening for an aging team at the 10 seed.
Do you actually think that if, let's say, Golden State runs the gauntlet and makes it to the 6 seed,
yes,
you think they can go to the Western Conference Finals?
I do. I do. Oh, there's no doubt.
What's the path there for you then?
Well, the path is that there's nobody in the Western Conference that should keep you up at night, including Minnesota or the only team, obviously, are the Denver Nuggets. Now, if they see the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals, I would say they'd be underdogs. They can beat the Nuggets.
They've had them close, 3 times this year? They can beat the
Nuggets, but the Nuggets are going to be favored, and the Nuggets should get past the Golden State Warriors. But Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and now Minnesota.
OKC's really good.
OKC's good.
And they're really young, which I think doesn't fare well for Golden State.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if you ever listen to the show, huge fan. And the Jalen Williams
amazing.
Out of Santa Clara is a
Chet
star.
Holmgren. Yep.
Chet Holmgren, and then Josh Giddey and Lou Dort. Like, they do it all. Here's the issue with Minnesota as well. No hard knocks.
Okay.
Usually what you got to do in order to get over that hump is sort of what Boston's done. Like, right, you've got to, as a young team, get to the playoffs. You get frustrated. You try again next year. You knock on that door. And then, you get to the NBA Finals. You get frustrated with that of the Golden State Warriors. There's usually that process that happens in the NBA with younger teams. Like, you usually got to go through that before you become that team. OKC hasn't had the hard knocks.
Even Golden State did that, right? They had 3 stars, but they had to take a loss here or there.
The Clippers were their nemesis for years. And, there's some teams that they don't fall under that heading, but typically when you're talking about teams like Oklahoma, Minnesota has a little playoff experience, but they haven't done it to the extent of these other teams. Like, they got to go. I still think they're 2 or 3 years, maybe a year away before them really beginning to be considered a team that's going to the NBA Finals and winning it.
Okay,
and I just think that's sort of what has been the blueprint for the NBA for years, going back in the days with the Detroit Pistons and the Bulls. Remember the Bulls?
Yeah,
Your Bulls.
Couldn't get past them.
And the Detroit Pistons. Remember a young Michael Jordan company? They had to get past the Pistons in order to get to the NBA Finals and be that team. Like, there's always that process when it comes to the playoffs in the NBA. All right, do we got to get to a break? Yeah. Kenny from Queens is like, get the hell out of here.
I don't want to get in trouble. Got to hit our brakes.
We'll continue with Warriors this week. It's the final segment when we return after this.
Hey, it's Willard and Dibs for Safeway. Head to Safeway this week for these amazing deals. Take advantage of the stock-up sale and enjoy...
Warriors This Week continues on 95.7 The Game.
Hi again, everybody. Dan Avone alongside Sterling Bennett. As we wrap up the show, the final half hour before the Golden State Warriors get ready for the San Antonio Spurs tonight without Wembanyama. Wembanyama is expected to be back on Monday. He, too, dealing with a bad ankle, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
And so Wembanyama lists San Antonio Spurs taking on a Golden State Warrior team that comes into the game at 33 up and 29 down. They're 4 games over the 500 mark once again. 10.5 games out of that first place behind the Thunder. More importantly, a half game back of the Lakers. They are a game and a half back of the Mavericks for the 8th seed, and they are 3 games back of the Kings for that 7th seed and 3.5 back. And that's really sort of what you're looking for. To walk down and catch the Phoenix Suns, 3.5 games back of Phoenix if they're to avoid the playing games altogether. So they certainly have their work cut out for them. There is no more room for losses to the likes of the Chicago Bulls of the world.
Yeah.
And they take on San Antonio. How do you see the 2 games? Are they splitting? Are they winning both?
I think they'll win both, especially if Wemby does not play. If that game on Monday he does play, it gets a lot tougher. But I do think Golden State should be able to take care of business against a 13-win team in the Spurs.
So apparently Wemby is expected to go on Monday.
Okay, so Wemby's back, not tonight, but okay. That game gets tougher, but even then, like, Steve Kerr has had a history of, at least in the past, 6-7 years, like, him and Pop, there really isn't usually a split there. There's so much admiration for Pop from Steve Kerr, obviously playing under him for a long time. But Golden State's a better team. Like, they're 20 wins more better, like 25 wins better in a playoff hunt. Like, you should be able to beat a 13-win team tonight without Wemby. And even when they get Wemby back on Monday, like, I get you're getting a star. Like, Wemby is awesome. If you have not seen him play, I mean, he is the next big thing of the NBA. But Golden State should be able to take care of business both nights, I believe.
Speaking of Wembanyama, he is... Look, we talked about this earlier, and for those of you that missed it, this guy is worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of players in professional sports. I remember I used to have this conversation when I was covering Ichiro. Like, Ichiro was one of the few guys in Major League Baseball that you'd actually pay to go see that particular player.
Curry's one now.
Curry has been one for a long, long time. Yeah. You pay to go see LeBron. I mean, the NBA, because it's only 5 players and because it's so player
actually see their faces
driven,
too.
Yeah, it's more apt you're more apt to do that at the NBA level as opposed to the NFL and certainly Major League Baseball. Wembanyama is, for those of you that have not seen him play, and I know it's in a small market in San Antonio, he's not on national television. For those that aren't familiar with him, he is exceeded, believe it or not, expectations. I mean, this guy, we talked about Oklahoma City and Chet Holmgren. They squared up. So they got a little Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain thing going on. Like, these two are vying for Rookie of the Year, even though Chet Holmgren's been in the league for 2 years.
Who can take control of the Midwest basketball scene, basically?
Yeah, and so do you consider San Antonio Midwest? Sort of Texas.
I mean, yeah, but that's okay. Considered the Midwest, right?
I defer to you, Mr. Okay. See? So when you talk about, these two are sort of got a rivalry going, the two bigs. And it was interesting. So they squared off. It was Chet Holmgren versus Wembanyama and San Antonio versus Oklahoma City. Last week, I want to say it was in San Antonio, and San Antonio won the game. So, they beat Oklahoma City. They can, it's not that they don't lose to everybody.
It's not going to be a cakewalk.
And so those two were going at each other.
Okay.
And so Chet Holmgren, who's at, what's Chet, 7'2", I want to say?
It's a big guy, yeah.
Wembanyama's coming in at 7'3", 7'4", I think 7'4". Those two, with Chet Holmgren, had the ball out on the wing about 16 to 18 feet from the hoop.
Chet's 7'1".
7'1", okay. And what's Wembanyama?
7'4".
7'4". So 7'1" versus 7'4", and here's Chet Holmgren using his handles, going between his legs, looking for a step-back 3, and you got Wembanyama at 7'4", matching him the whole way, and blocks his shot. And Chet Holmgren falls on his butt, and Wemby goes the other way and shoots a 3 of his own. You know what? In that one brief exchange, I was sitting there, Sterling, going, what the hell am I? What planet is this? When did we ever think we'd see guys at 7'2" and 7'4", like with handles, blocking a shot on a three, going back the other way and shooting a three on their own? Like when I was growing up, that wasn't even in my wildest fantasies.
Like for me, being 27, it was Tim Duncan and Shaq and other guys like that. It's not like you have.
They didn't have handles like this.
No, you got 7'4" point guards basically now. Like you have guys. It really does. Like if I'm the Spurs, you have the ultimate like offsetter. Like who can guard Wemby? Oh, bigger body guy. Yeah, he's got 4 inches on him still. You can't, and then you add in the wingspan. Yeah, he can hit threes. You're not blocking his shot. He'll block your shot easily. He's averaging almost 3.5 blocks a game as a rookie. Like, I know he's not playing tonight, which kind of puts a damper on the game, but Monday, like, my eyes are going to be glued to that screen.
Yeah, he's worth the price of admission, and he's going to change things. He is going to be, I think he has the potential to exceed anybody that's ever done it. I mean,
really?
Oh, as great as Michael Jordan was, as good as LeBron is, as good as Steph Curry is, what this guy can do, again, potentially.
Right.
He's got to stay healthy. It's 7'4".
I was going to say, do you worry about the body breaking down at a certain time?
You have to. Yeah. The lower extremities at 7'4", you have to.
He can also bulk up a little bit too, if he needs to.
Yeah, I used to think that.
Okay.
Until Kevin Durant came around, and I was like, Kevin Durant's he'll put on weight as he gets older. I guess he has, but from his rookie year, very thin.
Yeah, his legs are tiny.
Yeah, and Chet Holmgren's sort of the same way. So I don't know when you have a frame like that, just how much weight you can put on. But he is really, the potential with him of just changing the game. Because unlike Steph, you're not talking about shooting a three, which he can do.
Right.
I think over the last month and a half, he's over 40%.
He's so good.
40% from three. That's just not right. But it's his blocking of the shot and controlling the rim on both ends.
Yeah. The
crossover dribble, the getting to the rim. He plays like a guy who's a whole foot smaller than him. I mean, he has that mentality.
He's someone in baseball you call it a 5-tool player.
Yeah.
Like he's a 5-tool player in the NBA.
Yeah.
And
really is.
And he's not shooting 1-3 a game. He's shooting like 5 or 6. Like he is an all-around jump shot shooter, easily 3-point shooter behind the arc. He'll get in the paint. He'll back you down. Like he isn't a bigger guy in regards to like width. But when you're 7'4" and can shoot, like you just can do other things that this guys can't. And again, he is the ultimate offsetter. You put Wemby on any team, he will take you far and away to the playoffs in a couple of years. Like on ESPN, they're talking about how long is that timeline for him to be patient with the Spurs. This is rookie season.
Yeah.
They're saying how many years will he give them, not how many years will they give him. And they're talking about you got to go get guys now for Wemby.
You have to. The future is now.
Yeah.
You get this, the 2-3 year plan when it comes to Wembanyama does not apply. You've got to build a winner around him right now because you've got potentially, again, the greatest player to ever play this sport.
Yeah.
We've only, you could see this sort of in the works over the last decade, the last 2 decades with bigs, the guys that are able to shoot it and the Embiids of the world, that you knew that something like this was just a matter of time before someone like Wembanyama came out of the lab and out of France and was this sort of player. Like this has been in the works, that the developing and the creation, like Dr. Frankenstein working on the perfect basketball player who's 7'4", but can handle the basketball, can cross over, can get to the rim, can shoot threes. Like you could see that this has been in the making for, somewhere out in the world that this guy was going to come along, and voila, here he is. And it's one Victor Wembanyama. There's something about, you talked about his blocked shots. There's something about the block shot that just, it makes such a loud statement. And this is applicable also to Trace Jackson Davis.
Okay.
Like it's sort of, it's almost as, he blocked Giannis and he made Giannis look like a little kid. Like it's this sense of just humiliating.
It's
something that you regard as
almost disrespectful.
It's disrespectful, but it's just like, I don't. It's like, wow. This guy is, when he wants to, blocking people's shots that you, until his arrival, you never ever would even dream of.
Yeah.
And the block shot really makes, to me, a statement. I've maintained all along when it came to Trayce Jackson, my favorite play for the Golden State Warriors this year, prior to this week, was when he had the 2 blocks on Jaylen Brown.
Okay. And
that was about 2.5 months ago now, where he blocked Jaylen Brown's dunk. And I jumped out of my seat because he came over in the rotation. And this is when Trayce Jackson Davis wasn't playing regularly. And like, when the hell have you ever seen somebody wearing a Golden State Warrior uniform protect the rim like that? I don't think Bogut ever did it. I don't know who has ever done that, a big that suddenly is giving you a presence. It is this foundational piece.
It's been a long time.
That suddenly, you can walk down the alley and feel as though you can kick anybody's ass because you got this guy behind you, right? Yeah. Like, we can get into a fight. We got our boy behind us. Like, the Warriors have never had that. And when I saw that play, I was like, wow. Until this past week when he blocked Giannis on 2 consecutive shots, I believe.
Right, yeah.
And I think that had to sound out. That was the shot across the bow in the NBA that, hey, sit up and take notice. The Warriors got a big.
Yeah.
Because the Warriors' definition forever, even go back to Don Nelson, it's about, running the floor and shooting threes.
It was Andres Biedrins was there, and what Anthony Randolph was a draft pick. They just have not prioritized that position.
Or they've tried and they've missed. I think Weissman, they thought in the perfect world, could have been this guy.
Bogut was here, and they had Ezeli was here for a little bit. Like, they have tried and been usually veteran players that have played for 8 plus years that know how to play the game and whatnot. But what TJD has done in a short time span has been, I don't want to say a revelation for the Warriors, but it's certainly, at least as a fan, like, oh my goodness. Like, like, they finally have somebody in the paint that can be a presence, not just on the boards, but as a shot defender, a shot blocker, where that hasn't been here the past 4 or 5 seasons.
And again, just to push back on Steve Kerr when he says that I've got to get TJD ready for the playoffs, I got to give him some minutes. Well, you've had a couple of months where he could have played. You've had ample time to get him on the floor, I think. Now, were you going to start him at the beginning of the year? No. But I think he showed signs that he could have gotten a lot more run a lot earlier than this. And my favorite coach in the NBA, Steve Kerr, one of my favorite people in the world. I always preface to Steve Kerr. But again, on a show like this, nobody's above criticism. And so Steve Kerr, I think, has just been slow to that party all year long. Even Podziemski, to a certain degree. Podziemski didn't get run until he was forced into the Minnesota game because there was no one to be played. I mean, Klay Thompson, believe it or not, got thrown out of a game. And then you had, that was the game Draymond Green gets kicked out of a game. All this happening, before the third quarter, and Podziemski gets forced into that contest and had like 24 points, I think, and It was his sort of coming out party. And, and we saw Jonathan Kuminga basically having to go into his office and saying, dude, what's up? I need to play. Why are you yanking me like this?
Well, going back to Kuminga publicly stating, like, I'm not really happy with the rotation or the minutes I'm getting, that is a moment, like you said, that the Golden State Warriors really haven't had that locker room cancer. Like, that could have been a breaking moment for Kerr and Kuminga of like, okay, like, fine, like, if you don't want to, bend to my will being Steve Kerr, okay, like, we can trade you away. What do? They come together, figure it out. Maybe it is Kerr, unraveling that rope somewhat, giving Kuminga more leash, and now we see what happens. Sometimes it isn't always right for the player to do so. Sometimes the player is dead wrong and they got to go learn their lesson. But for Kuminga, it was like, hey, Kerr, give me a little bit more leeway and I can show you what I can do. And I think the Warriors are much better for it. We have Vel Mack on the YouTube chat, brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union, saying, don't forget about Mo Spates. And Mo Spates, I think, was a great Warrior.
Mo Buckets.
Like, he was awesome. We also have Dublin Marge asking, where's Evan? Evan will be back next week at a bachelor party for one of his boys, not hosting pre or post game. It's Jason Dumas tonight, so stay tuned. Cron 4's Jason Dumas, he'll be in. But again, going back to the Golden State Warriors, and
I'll tell you where Evan is. Evan is he's 8 beers deep in Memphis right now.
Oh yeah, he's in Nashville.
He's in Nashville listening to some dude with sunglasses wail right now on a saxophone as he just gets
the dueling pianos.
As he gets liquored.
Man.
No, he doesn't drink.
I'm pretty sure they saw a Vanderbilt baseball game yesterday.
So, what were we getting back to?
No, I was just saying, talking about Evan, whatever, but going back to Kuminga, it took Kuminga going in telling Kerr, hey, feed me. I need to eat a little more. I'm hungry. I think for Golden State, I do wonder if that opened up doors for players like TJD to Podziemski. Okay, maybe Steve Kerr said, I need to open my eyes to allowing young players to play more. They can succeed in the NBA.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter, I guess, how they got to this place, because whether you can say Kerr was slow to recognizing these younger players or not, I mean, they're now playing.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the best version of the Golden State Warriors. I mean, it really doesn't matter how we can argue that it could have happened a little bit sooner, but the rotation right now and the usage of these young players when Steph Curry is healthy, this to me is the best version you're going to get of the Golden State Warriors. This gives you a puncher's chance to get to, is I think, the Western Conference Finals, because nobody else scares me aside from Denver, as crazy as that statement might sound. But this is the best. The Moses Moody now getting run.
Yeah.
TJD now leapfrogging Dario Saric and Kevon Looney. Podziemski a couple of weeks ago moved into the starting lineup. Jonathan Kuminga is now a starter and a guy getting nearly 30 minutes of run. All the kids now are playing, and it's working and it's coexisting, and the chemistry is there with the older players. So this is it. What you saw against Milwaukee is what's going to give you an opportunity, that blend of the youth and the experience. That is the Golden State Warriors in 2024 that's going to give you the best shot of potentially beating the Denver Nuggets or making a serious run in the postseason. We have a couple of minutes. The phone lines are open at 888-957-9570. Give me Matthew hanging out in San Francisco. What's up, Matty?
Hey, guys. I just wanted to tell you an observation I had when I was watching that Bulls game. And one of the things that stood out to me is there were some aspects of the players on the Bulls that I wish the Warriors had. I couldn't help but be a little envious. One is Vucevic, a big guy who can shoot, a mobile big guy, sort of a versatile big guy. Secondly, obviously, DeRozan. I know that Kuminga is kind of getting to that level, but a guy who can just, create his own shot, get to the line, that's another thing the Warriors do not have. And lastly, Caruso, just a really good on-the-ball defender. Although we have GP2, I don't think we have a guy with that type of size who can just kind of defend multiple positions. And I'll take any comments off the air.
It's a lot of good points, Matthew. I think DeMar DeRozan is someone that I said when they were, is Andrew Wiggins going to be here? He's going to get traded. That's someone I told everyone in the office, hey, go get me DeMar DeRozan. He can feed inside the paint. He'll get to the line. And for Kuminga recently, we talked about his three-point shooting earlier. I don't want to see him shooting threes. I want to see you in the paint, boxing some guys up and getting down there, driving to the basket. And I want to see him. And he's arguably Golden State's best player at doing so, getting to the free throw line. You want to talk about buying your veteran players a break when it's the third quarter and Chicago's going on their run, which they did, to take the lead back. What do I want to see? Kuminga getting in the lane, getting free throws. It buys your team a mini break. It allows Kerr to make rotational change. Kuminga is, and Wiggins too. Him and Wiggins have to do that more. Get to the line, especially when your team's reeling in the third quarter. I want to see Kuminga and Wiggins step up with Curry off the court.
You know what I love about DeRozan? He lives with the midi.
I love it. Yeah,
the mid-range.
It's great.
Bring back the mid-range.
He's what Wiggins really should have been. He's not going to hit threes, but he can get in the paint, hit the mid-range jumper, get you an easy two. Golden State at times the past couple years, they will live and die by the three. What do you need? Give me that mid-range jumper. Give me a two. Keep me in this game. Make a 4-point lead for my opponent, not go to 7. Keep it within 2 points if you can.
And the caller also asked about Alex Caruso. Well, he is a guy that
Kerr loves him.
And they wanted. I mean, that is, again, if Kerr was to create the perfect basketball player to fit into his system, it would be Alex Caruso. And I think that Podziemski's got a little AC in him.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
He's just not as small or not as big, and he's not as seasoned.
Also not as great of a free throw shooter as Caruso is.
Well, that can improve.
Right, that comes with time, right? But
yeah, and his outside shot. No, he's not as good of a player as Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso is one of the best two-way players.
Seasoned. Lakers, Bulls now,
But Caruso would have been the perfect Golden State Warrior. I just think Chicago was delusional when the Warriors knocked on the door and said, hey, what is it going to take for Alex Caruso? And I think they asked for everybody, including Kuminga and draft picks and Moody and whomever.
Well, I think Chicago now regrets that. They could have traded Zach LaVine, didn't do it. Could have traded Vucevic, didn't do it. And I get they're fighting for a spot in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, but they wanted to blow that thing up in Chicago. And we're just like, give us 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 first-round draft picks for our stars, and no one's paying that for Rosen or DeMar DeRozan or Vucevic or even Caruso. No one's giving you a first or 2 first-round draft picks for Alex Caruso. It's not going to happen. But now, Moses Moody, I would have said yes if I was Chicago. And I do think, for as good as Moody has played, I think Steve Kerr would have said, yeah, we'll give you Moody and a first for Caruso. I really do.
And as far as Vucevic hitting threes, he's always been a good outside shooter. Yeah. He's always been a good player. And he is just somebody that maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, but Vucevic is very, very effective. And yeah, the Warriors would love to have a guy like that. But it's just going to take too much to get somebody like him. And then the Warriors, look, they're fine as far as their bigs with the emergence of Trace Jackson Davis, as far as I'm concerned.
They do need that stretch big, though, which should be Sarge, but...
All right, for my man Sterling Bennett. Sterling, you'll be working throughout the day?
I'm here from, 8 a.m. all the way until whenever the Warriors post-game's over with Jason Dumas.
By the way, I appreciate you dressing up today. You look good. Sterling Bennett, I mean, you've lost weight. Yeah. You got the faces defined. You look like a boy model, man.
Boy, I came in yesterday to fill in for Evan, and Bonte was like, look at that jawline. And I was like, okay, take a step back. I'm behind glass. You can't see very well, but...
Now, let's all keep in mind, it's so he can fit into the monkey suit when he walks down the aisle in about a month or 2 months. So
May 31st.
May 31st.
May 31st.
He's doing it, fans. That's right. As Sterling Bennett doing a bang-up job filling in today for one Evan Giddings, for my man Sterling, and, of course, Kenny from Queens producing today. This is Dan Avone reminding you that the Golden State Warriors tonight take on the San Antonio Spurs. Jason Dumas out of KRON and 95.7's own. We'll give you the pregame show beginning, I believe, at 6. Or no, 4. 4:30?
Yeah, 4:30.
4:30 with the pregame show, handing things off to Tim Roy and company. Until then, this is Dan Avone saying we'll see you right back here next week for another edition of Warriors This Week. So long, everybody.
Are you curious about who offers the best deals on top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs? The answer is surprising. It's not online.